Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through the painted crowds of medieval Europe, right into the belly of a festival, the kind you see in illustrations, all draped banners and cheerful faces, laughter echoing off weathered stones. Picture yourself in a tangle of bodies in a candlelit square, the air thick with the perfume of spilled ale, roasted meat and sweat. Musicians wail on odd stringed instruments. Jugglers toss flaming torches. You squint through the haze and see masked dancers weaving, masks grinning wide, eyes shadowed, velvet ribbons fluttering. But tonight, I'll take your hand and gently pull you behind the music and the mirth, show you the bruises beneath the silks, and, if you're paying attention, let you see just how sharp those painted smiles can be. You probably won't survive this party, not if you're hoping for a fairy tale. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You're not the first to be dazzled by a festival's wild masks, highborn lords with silk-covered faces, peasants with clumsy painted wood, children wrapped in scraps, giggling as they peek through animal snouts. The mask is freedom, or so the crowds believe. You can become anyone. Your debts and your troubles disappear for a night. Even the village gossip can't spot you, unless, of course, your laugh gives you away. But there's a kind of pain that seeps through the mask if you look close enough. Try walking through a festival with nothing but a borrowed cowl, your real identity pressed flat beneath the musty wool. You watch masked dancers swirl past, their laughter bright and brittle. If you step behind the puppet theatre's curtain, you find a different kind of scene. A red-faced actor, wiping grime from his brow, counting bruises on his ribs. The mask, he whispers to you, rubs you raw. Smile wide, and no one knows you're bleeding. That's the thing about medieval festivals. Everyone's acting, and most would rather you didn't notice. Those grinning animal heads. Some are stuffed with straw, others with old sweat rags, but all smell like something you'd rather forget. Some masks are carved so tight you can barely breathe, and there's always a risk you'll forget who you are beneath it. Just ask the drunken reveller who mistakes you for someone else, or the woman who, after one too many mugs of ale, confides her secrets to the wrong painted smile. Historians still argue whether the masks were meant to free or to trap. Some say masking was a release, a way to let off steam before the next grinding season began. Others suspect it was a social safety valve. A chance for the powerless to mock the mighty, as long as everyone pretended not to recognize each other by morning. Of course, the nobleman's mask is trimmed in velvet and gold leaf, while the miller's is just painted burlap with a broken strap. You might fool a stranger, but not the tax collector. Slip out of the lamplight and you might see something darker. There's a boy, still in costume, shivering behind a cart. His father, drunk and red-eyed, pulls at the mask's ribbons, cursing the cost of the costume. The boy's cheeks are smeared with tears and paint. Don't let it slip, the father mutters, or they'll know it's us. Sometimes the mask isn't protection. It's a prison. You pass a parade of dancers, their feet pounding the flagstones in perfect rhythm. But if you follow them backstage, you hear a different tune. Shoes too tight, blisters rubbed raw, old injuries gritted through with a painted grin. There are no painkillers, just stale bread and cider after hours, and the promise of a little coin if you dance well enough to keep the crowds from drifting to the next spectacle. At the edge of the crowd, a woman in a fox mask slumps onto a barrel, clutching her side. She winces as she pulls off her mask, revealing a black eye half hidden by flour and rouge. Part of the act, she says. It's all part of the act. Remember too that for every parade there's a loser. Masks can be ripped off in moments of drunken fury. A jilted lover, a rival tradesman, a thief caught by the collar. Public humiliation is never far away. Some festivals even sell rotten fruit specifically for hurling at the disgraced. You duck as an orange explodes near your feet, and a crowd of apprentices hoots at a red-cheeked tanner whose mask has slipped sideways. There's no room for dignity here, only survival and maybe a bit of luck. Every festival needs a king and queen, often chosen at random, or if the local priest has his way, by some rigged dice. For one night, a pig farmer becomes king of fools. His crown is heavy and smells faintly of onions. His sceptre, an old ladle, chipped and greasy. The crowd cheers, but you notice the way his friends nudge him, whispering the duties that come with the title, lead the silliest dance, eat the worst stew, endure a parade of staged insults. By morning he's lost his voice and sometimes his lunch. It's easy to believe these roles are all in fun. But behind the scenes, some crowns carry sharp thorns. The queen of the festival might be doused in cold water, pelted with ash, or forced to recite awkward verses while balancing on a creaky barrel. Tradition, the older women say. She's lucky to be chosen. Her trembling hands suggest otherwise. You can't help but notice the invisible hierarchies even among the disguised. The rich can afford masks with gilded details and perfume strong enough to mask the stink of fear. The poor, they're left with cracked wood and stale beer breath. One smithy's apprentice trades his last coin for a fresh mask only to watch it crack in the rain. Later, you see him sulking near the latrines, glue and dignity running down his chin. The masked dances stretch long into the night, but even as the music swells, you feel the tension. A wrong step, a misjudged jest, and you might be exiled from the fun, or worse. There's an old superstition. If you remove your mask before dawn, your luck is ruined for a year. So you cling to your disguise, even as sweat pools beneath the velvet, and the air grows so thick you can barely breathe. Sometimes things go wrong. The masks embolden the crowd. Tempers flare, strangers clash. A brewer's son throws a punch at the wrong masked dancer, and suddenly you're caught in a whirl of fists, shrieks, and flying goblets. When the constables arrive, they haul the troublemakers away, but no one can remember exactly who started it. Just a mask, they shrug. Just a game. There's an almost magical quality to the anonymity of the night. For a few stolen hours, old feuds and fears seem to vanish. But as dawn approaches, the masks come off, some torn in haste, others eased away with reverence. Faces emerge, creased with exhaustion, eyes rimmed with regret. You see the fox-masked woman slip away, hiding her bruises behind a scarf. The king of fools hands back his sceptre, his shoulders hunched. The apprentices gather their rotten fruit, the magic fading like breath on a mirror. Historians still argue about the purpose of all this pageantry. Was it truly liberation, or just another layer of control? Some say the masks offered escape, a chance to say what you really think, if only for one night. Others whisper that the greatest cruelty was in the morning, when everyone had to become themselves again, forced to remember who was king and who was fool. You wander home as the city yawns awake, bits of confetti stuck to your boots, a borrowed mask tucked in your pocket. The square is already being swept, but scraps of ribbon and the distant echo of laughter linger. For one brief night you became someone else, and for better or worse you'll never forget the weight of that mask, the way it hid you, or maybe the way it revealed you. The crowd's laughter grows louder as you drift from the masked parade toward the centre of the square, drawn by a chorus of oohs and ahs that rise like steam over a cauldron. At first it sounds almost magical, a living orchestra of joy. But then you hear the bellow of an animal, sharp and wrong, echoing from behind a painted fence. The scent in the air changes, a faint earthy panic layered beneath roasting meat and burning torches. Tonight the festival is about to show its other face. Animal entertainers, beloved in storybooks, tragic in the shadows. You push through the throng and find yourself pressed against a rickety wooden barrier, just high enough that you have to stand on tiptoe to see. On the other side, a troop of painted men coaxes a bear to stand on its hind legs. A chain gleams from its nose ring. The children shriek, some with delight, some with something else entirely. The bear lumbers, sways, then stumbles. For a moment you wonder if it's part of the act, but the look in its dark, wet eyes tells a different story. Festival animals are everywhere tonight. Dancing goats, monkeys in tiny tunics, a cockerel that's learned to play chess by pecking grain from certain squares. You watch as a dog dressed like a knight parades on its hind legs, wobbling under the weight of a wooden sword. The crowd is wild for it, but when the trick's done, the animal's owner yanks the dog up by its collar and drags it behind the stage, voice low and harsh. The dog glances back once before disappearing behind a pile of broken props. You feel a pang, wondering what waits in the darkness back there. If you listen carefully, past the music and cheers, you'll catch the sound of suffering, the quick slap of a stick, the barked command, the whimper swallowed by applause. Most festival goers don't want to know what happens out of sight. In medieval times, a festival wasn't truly complete without animal acts, but you soon realise that the creature's comfort is always an afterthought. There's a troupe of travelling dancers nearby, led by a man with a hawk perched on his wrist. He makes a show of tossing scraps to the hawk, which snatches them mid-air, wings wide and gleaming in the firelight. Spectators press closer, throwing coins and scraps of bread. "Watch him catch a mouse," someone shouts, and the man obliges, producing a trembling rodent from a sack. The mouse doesn't stand a chance. The hawk's performance is quick, bloody, and met with a cheer. You duck aside as a young boy rushes past, chasing after a pig with a painted ribbon tied around its neck. The crowd roars, betting on which peasant will catch the festival pig. The winner gets to keep it, if he can catch it at all. The pig squeals in terror, slipping between grasping hands and clumsy feet. When it's finally cornered, its sides are streaked with mud and blood. The boy who catches it beams for a moment, then his father yanks the pig away, muttering about supper and what this thing cost us last year. The family disappears into the night, prize and pride both already a little bruised. Historians still argue whether animal acts were ever as beloved as chroniclers claim. Some say these performances united communities, teaching children about the wonders of the natural world. Others whisper that they were more about power, the human mastery of beast, the demonstration of who gets to control and who's left to suffer. You can see the debate play out with every nervous animal, every harsh order, every forced trick. The festival's star turn is always the bear baiting. You hear about it long before you see it, whispers carried on the wind. The old bear's up next, don't miss it. You find a spot at the edge of a packed circle. At the centre stands a tethered bear, heavy and scarred, swiping at the air with dull claws. The men in charge brandish sticks and jeer, daring the bear to charge. Then they release a pair of dogs, muzzled but hungry, who dart in to nip at the bear's legs. The bear swings and roars. The crowd surges forward, half in horror, half in fascination. You watch as the dogs dart in, snap, retreat, again and again. Sometimes the bear wins, sending the dogs yelping. Sometimes the dogs win, biting flesh while the bear roars in pain. In the end, the winner is whichever animal can stand upright. Nearby, children play at their own version, tying string around the neck of a stray cat and making it dance on its hind legs. A passing priest shoos them away, but not before one child shrieks in laughter. You wonder what the cat will remember of tonight, if it ever dares to return. Out of the chaos, you spot a merchant selling magical animal potions. Rabbit's foot for luck, bear's bile for strength, vials of wolf blood to ensure a good harvest. Customers jostle each other, eager for a taste of the wild. The merchant's hands are stained with old blood, his smile far too wide. You try not to think about where his potions come from, or what he'll do with the animals left unsold at night's end. It's easy, among the laughter and music, to forget that the animals on display have their own stories, their own private agonies. For every triumphant dog or dancing goat, there are those who don't survive the season, left behind, abandoned, or simply too broken to perform. You watch a weary horse pull a creaking cart, its flanks heaving with every step. A group of drunks pelt it with apple cores, and the owner barely notices. "He'll rest when we do," the man says, not unkindly, as he tugs the reins. You wonder if the horse believes him. The oddest act of the night is a travelling serpent charmer. He claims to have brought a dragon from the east, a great mystery to all. The dragon is a huge, scaly lizard, chained to a stake and clearly terrified by the torchlight. The charmer boasts, waving a stick, then pokes at the creature to make it hiss. The crowd gasps, convinced they've seen a miracle. Only later, when the crowd moves on, do you spot the animal curled in a heap, breathing shallow, eyes cloudy with exhaustion. Some festivals crown the serpent as a symbol of mystery and wonder, but tonight it's just another victim of spectacle. Amid the chaos, there's always someone whose job it is to clean up. The animal boy, a young servant who moves from act to act, collecting droppings, scooping up wounded animals and shooing away strays. He's paid in leftover bread and the promise that one day he might get to be part of the main show. As he works, you catch him stroking a battered old goat behind the stage, whispering, "Sorry, old girl, just one more night." One of the lighter moments, if you can call it that, comes when a parrot, trained to curse in Latin, is brought out to bless the festival. The bird promptly insults the local bishop, and the crowd bursts into laughter. Even the bishop can't help but smile. After all, nobody can accuse a bird of blasphemy. It's a moment of strange shared joy, but you can't help noticing the clipped wings and the empty look in the parrot's eye. Some towns try to outdo each other with ever more exotic acts. Trained foxes, monkeys on stilts, even rumours of a fish that sings. Most of these are nothing more than clever tricks, a hidden pipe, a concealed child making the sounds. But sometimes the animals themselves pay the price for failed illusions. One old story tells of a festival goose, dressed up as a swan and forced to parade before the mayor. When the trick was discovered, the bird was thrown into the river to the laughter of everyone except the boy who'd trained it. Historians still argue about the morality of these entertainments. Was it simple ignorance, a lack of empathy bred by hard living? Or did people truly believe animals were part of the world to be used as they pleased, their pain a small price for a few hours' joy? Some chroniclers claim that a good festival was measured by how many animals it could parade, torment, and eventually roast. The animal performers' suffering isn't limited to the stage. Behind the scenes, they're housed in cramped pens, fed on scraps, often sleeping chained or muzzled. The lucky ones get a pat on the head or a leftover bone. The unlucky ones limp away when the crowds disperse. Once the main event is over, owners round up their animals, tally their coins, and set off for the next town. Some animals are never seen again. As the night wears on, the crowd grows rowdier. The bear's act is finished, the hawk is hooded, the pigs have been won or lost. A handful of children wander among the empty stalls, looking for stray kittens to adopt for the night, though most will be forgotten by morning. There's a strange quiet after the noise, a hollow feeling left behind by laughter and applause. If you're brave enough to slip behind the tents, you see the animal acts packing up. A broken cart, a stained mat, a handful of coins and a lot of tired eyes. Animal and human alike. You can't help but think of the cost of this spectacle. For every cheer and coin tossed on the stage, there's a cut, a bruise, a frightened glance. The next time you pass a puppet show or a dancing bear in the town square, you might remember what you saw tonight. The truth behind the painted fence, the pain behind the party. And you might wonder, was it worth it? Or is the real magic of the festival found somewhere else, somewhere quieter? Perhaps in the eyes of the animal boy who sneaks a crust of bread to an old goat and dreams of a different kind of show. The music pulls you onward, deeper into the heart of the festival, where the smell of roasting meat is almost strong enough to mask the tang of sweat and trampled grass. Everywhere you look, it seems, someone is eating or calling out for more. Vendors with aprons smeared in grease, children licking honey from their wrists, a butcher hacking a carcass beneath banners daubed with saints and lions. In the warm glow of torches, the feasting looks endless, luxurious, a once-in-a-lifetime spread that even the poorest peasants can sample. But as you get closer, picking your way past overturned stools and spilled ale, you start to see the cracks. This is the festival's grand banquet, but if you peel back the golden crust, what you find underneath is less appetizing. Feasts are the backbone of any good medieval celebration, an explosion of colour and flavour, a rare excuse for everyone to eat more than they should. The long trestle tables creak beneath mountains of bread, riverfish glistening on wooden platters, pies crammed with mystery meats. There's always stew bubbling in massive cauldrons, ladled out to anyone with a bowl, and the courage to risk what's floating on top. Cooks holler for more firewood, boys run back and forth with jugs of watered wine, and somewhere, always, a dog manages to snag a joint of beef from an unwatched plate. For a visitor, it all seems dazzling, if a bit overwhelming. You snag a heel of bread, dip it in broth, and try to convince yourself the chewy bits are, as promised, only turnip. But look a little longer, and you see the real labour of the feast. Behind the tents, teams of kitchen boys, barefoot, soot-smeared and sleepless, hack bones with rusty knives. The head cook is everywhere at once, barking orders, scolding a girl for burning the stew, sending a boy to fetch water from a well 2 streets away. The air is thick with the sound of hacking, scraping, and the occasional shriek when someone's fingers stray too close to the cleaver. Historians still argue whether the medieval banquet was truly egalitarian or just a performance for the wealthy. Some claim the feast was a rare moment when all classes mingled, at least in theory. But walk past the velvet-robed lords, and you'll find a sharp division. Those with pewter plates and fine wine on one side, those with wooden bowls and thin broth on the other. One merchant's wife complains loudly that her pheasant is undercooked. Meanwhile, the labourers at the end of the table gnaw at gristly bones, praying no one notices if they sneak a second helping. The festival's cooks are masters of improvisation. When the bread runs out, they slice old loaves, soak them in ale, and call it pudding. The pies, so golden on the outside, are often stuffed with whatever was cheapest at the market that morning: liver, pigeon, sometimes a scrap of fish if you're lucky. There's a rumour that last year someone slipped a cat into the stew. No one can prove it, but the joke lingers, shared in nervous whispers as each new ladle is served. You try to sit on a bench but find it sticky with spilled cider. No one seems to mind. Children dart under tables, snatching scraps, daring each other to eat the strangest thing they can find. You watch as a girl bites into a honeyed fig, only to spit it out, cursing the wasp wriggling inside. The others laugh, and someone tosses the fig into the straw for the pigs. The line between feast and farce is thinner than you'd think. If you slip behind the main tent past the piles of dirty plates and discarded bones, you'll find the real cost of the celebration. A heap of broken dishes, buckets of offal, and kitchen helpers scrubbing pots with handfuls of sand. A scrawny boy picks maggots from a haunch of pork before tossing it into the stew. No sense wasting good meat, the cook grumbles. Boil it long enough and no one will know. The air back here is hot, close, and faintly sickly. Nothing like the laughter at the front. Every so often something goes badly wrong. A barrel of ale turns sour. A pie oozes green when cut. The village healer is always close by, dispensing mint leaves and prayers to those who've eaten too fast, too much, or just the wrong thing. You see one unlucky juggler doubled over behind a wagon, retching up a half-digested supper. His friends cheer, tossing coins at his feet. He'll be back on his hands soon enough. Jokes about festival feasting are as old as the festivals themselves. There's the one about the monk who blessed the bread with one hand and stole the cheese with the other, or the old chestnut about the butcher who never sold the same cut twice, because it all came from the same mysterious beast. But beneath the laughter, there's an edge of fear. Everyone knows someone who once got sick at a feast. Some say it was the oysters, others the mushrooms, others the well water gone foul. The healer says it's the will of the saints. The baker blames the fishmonger. In the end, most blame the wine and return for another round. You pass a table where the town's poorest are allowed to gather only after the nobles have finished. The scraps are meagre, gnawed bones, crusts of bread, maybe a chunk of gristle. One old woman wraps her share in a rag to take home, while her granddaughter begs for a little honey. "Next year," the woman says, "if we're lucky." This is the other side of the feast, the hope that next time you might get more than leftovers. The festival's signature dish is always something meant to impress. A roasted boar with an apple in its mouth, or a peacock refeathered after cooking, its colours blazing in the torchlight. The lords pose beside it for the painter, servants trailing behind with knives. But as soon as the picture is taken, the best bits are whisked away to the high table, and the rest carved up for the crowd. By the time you get there, the only thing left is a charred wing or a slice of dry bread. Sanitation, as you quickly learn, is not the festival's strong suit. You dodge a line of slop buckets, nearly trip over a dog licking a pool of ale, and watch a kitchen helper toss bones into the street. The town's rats feast too, scurrying under tables bold as any guest. Some claim they're lucky. It's a sign there'll be plenty next year. Others mutter about curses and illness, clutching charms and crossing themselves. Historians still debate just how often food poisoning swept through festivals. Some chronicles tell of whole villages sickened by a single spoiled barrel of fish. Others say the threat was exaggerated, a scare tactic to keep the poor from pressing too close to the tables. But you see the truth in the pallor of the cooks, the care with which the bread is inspected for mould, the wary sniff every time a jug of wine is opened. Food is joy and danger, abundance and risk all in one. And yet the feast carries on. There's something irresistible about eating with abandon, surrounded by music and laughter, even if you know the bread is stale and the cider flat. The promise of plenty, even for a single night, is enough to make most people forget their worries. A miller's wife pulls you into a circle, pressing a sticky bun into your hand. Eat, laugh, dance. Tomorrow, the fields will still be waiting. You see a line of boys daring each other to eat the fire stew, a dish so spicy the cooks joke it was invented to cover up the taste of bad meat. Each boy takes a gulp, turns bright red, and tries to look brave while the crowd laughs. Later you see them clustered behind a barrel, dunking their heads in a bucket of water, faces flushed but proud. It's a ritual of sorts. Suffer a little tonight. Boast about it for months. The night deepens, and the tables slowly empty. Some festival goers drift away, bellies full, faces flushed with drink. Others linger, hoping for one last scrap or a friendly chat with the cooks. You see the head cook finally slump onto a bench, a mug of wine in his trembling hand. His helpers collapse around him, laughing quietly about the day's disasters. Someone pulls out a battered lute, and for a moment the kitchen is its own kind of stage, a place where exhaustion is worn like a medal and survival is reason enough to celebrate. On your way out, you pass the trash heaps once more, now picked over by dogs and rats. The scent is overwhelming. Stale beer, rotting meat, the sharp tang of onions. A drunk stumbles by, slipping on a slick of gravy, then rights himself with a laugh. "That's how you know the party was good," he shouts. "If you can still stand up, you didn't eat enough." You can't help but marvel at how much effort goes into the feast, the hours of labour, the mountains of food, the endless cleaning up. It's a performance in its own right, one that leaves its actors battered and invisible by dawn. Tomorrow, when the festival is just a memory, the kitchen helpers will be back at their usual chores, the cooks nursing sore backs, and the town's dogs dreaming of roast pig. Historians may never agree on whether medieval festivals brought true equality or just a brief illusion of it. Some nights, the feast feels like a miracle. Other times, it's a reminder of how much divides the hungry from the satisfied. But tonight, as you pick a crumb from your sleeve and watch the last of the stews bubble away, you know you've tasted the real festival. Messy, chaotic, unfair, and, for one fleeting moment, glorious. You follow the shouts and whoops that ricochet through the winding festival lanes, moving away from the heavy smells of roasting meat and spilled ale. Ahead, a crowd is gathering, its shape always shifting, growing rowdier by the second. "Hurry up, it's starting," someone calls, and you're swept along with the rest. Now, in the flickering torchlight, you catch your first glimpse of what every festival promises but few remember fondly: the games. Not the gentle kind either, the ones written about in the stories of brave knights and sweet village victories, but the brutal, gleefully dangerous competitions that, for one night, turn even the most cautious peasant into a reckless daredevil. The festival's games are infamous. Just ask any village elder rubbing their knee on a rainy morning, remembering how they once flew in the wrestling pit and landed flat in the mud. You find yourself at the edge of a makeshift arena, rope staked to the ground, splinters of wood outlining a ring that smells like sweat, trampled grass, and the faint metallic tang of old blood. This is the playground for the festival's most raucous sport, the infamous shin kicking. Yes, you heard right. Contestants stuff their trousers with straw, square up against their neighbours, and take turns kicking each other in the shins as hard as possible. The first to drop to their knees loses, and the crowd loves every moment. The air is thick with laughter, bets being made, and the occasional gasp as a particularly vicious kick lands. You see a baker, twice your size, hopping around as a wiry thatcher lands blow after blow. There's a toothless referee, his job mostly to break up fights that get too real, but also to accept bribes in the form of cider. Somewhere in the melee, a chicken escapes its handler and darts through the arena, causing a brief, glorious chaos as everyone tries to avoid slipping on the bird. The chicken, naturally, is the only one to leave the ring unscathed. Historians still argue about the origins of these games. Were they age-old traditions rooted in ancient rituals meant to strengthen the community? Or were they simply a way for bored villagers to get revenge on the neighbour whose pig ruined their garden last spring? Some chroniclers write that the church frowned upon such brutality, but looking around at the number of monks betting on the outcome, you begin to suspect the rules are more flexible after dark. You spot the next event, the greasy pole climb. The goal is simple: reach the top of a long greased wooden pole and grab the prize, usually a cured sausage, sometimes a purse of coins, or, if the organisers are feeling cruel, a live goose. Men, women and children line up, slicking their hands on their trousers, sizing up the challenge. The first few attempts end in disaster. Contestants barely make it a metre before sliding down into a pile of mud and onlookers. The crowd jeers, but also cheers, loving the spectacle. Eventually, a determined girl with braids and a wicked grin manages to shimmy her way halfway up before the pole, creaking ominously, leans just enough to dump her and the prize into the waiting arms of a cluster of local boys. Off to one side, a group of old men reminisce about the good old days, when the pole was taller, the mud deeper, and the prizes more generous. Once, one claims, they put a barrel of ale at the top, and the winner had to drink it all before climbing down. The others nod, perhaps remembering, perhaps embellishing. Memory is a slippery thing at festivals. There are races too, three-legged sack and sometimes barefoot sprints over thorny ground. You see a group of children with arms tied together, laughing so hard they can barely stand, much less run. A pair of determined sisters nearly win until one trips on a tree root, sending them both tumbling, skirts flying, faces smudged with mud. Their mother pulls them upright, dusts them off, and tells them to remember this when you're old and bored. It's a moment of rough joy, a lesson learned through scraped knees and roaring laughter. But the festival isn't all playful roughhousing. Some contests turn dark quickly. There's the infamous Catch the Greased Pig event. You watch as a terrified piglet is let loose among a ring of men and boys, each more determined than the last to catch it. The pig squeals, men shout, and you cringe as bodies crash together, hands grabbing at anything that moves. The lucky winner, red-faced and panting, hoists the pig overhead to cheers, but you notice the animal's fear, and the way the losing contestants limp away, mud-streaked and a little less cheerful. Nearby, an archery contest draws the skilled and the overconfident alike. Arrows thud into straw targets, sometimes hitting the mark, sometimes going wild. One arrow shatters a tankard balanced on a fence, earning a loud round of applause. There are rumours that a few years ago a wayward shot clipped a passing chicken, and now archers must aim away from the livestock. You wonder if that's a true story, or just another bit of festival folklore. The most dangerous event of all, though, is the running of the bulls. It's not every festival that dares this, but the ones that do become legends, sometimes for all the wrong reasons. You watch as a group of young men, fueled by ale and bravado, gather at the end of a narrow alleyway. The crowd parts, shouting encouragement, as two angry bulls are prodded into the lane. The runners jostle for position, some clutching each other for support, others whispering prayers. The bulls charge, hooves clattering on cobblestones. The crowd surges, some running for cover, others leaning in for a better view. The bravest, or the most foolish, manage to dodge the bulls and sprint to the finish, cheered by friends and family. Others aren't so lucky, limping away with bruises, torn clothes and stories to tell. The festival healer is never far behind, bandages at the ready. Games aren't just for the young. There's an event called the Old Men's Boast, where elders sit in a circle, telling wild tales of past glories and daring feats. The winner is decided not by the truth, but by the laughter and applause of the crowd. Some stories are familiar, some outrageous. A man claims he once wrestled a wolf, another swears he won the greasy pole contest blindfolded. The truth, as always, is less important than the performance. Woven through all of this is a deep, sometimes dangerous sense of competition. Neighbours compete fiercely, sometimes nursing old grudges. A baker's assistant trips a carpenter accidentally during a sack race. A brewer's daughter is accused of cheating at the egg toss. Sometimes arguments break into shoving matches, and the constables must step in, reminding everyone that the goal is fun, even as bruised egos and scraped elbows tell another story. Historians still debate whether these games brought communities together or drove them apart. Did they forge lasting bonds of camaraderie, or sow seeds of resentment that lasted well beyond the festival's end? Some say the rough games taught valuable lessons about resilience and humility. Others believe they were just another excuse for chaos, violence, and the settling of old scores. Laughter rises and falls with each contest, but there's always an edge, a sense that disaster is never far away. The field where games are held is pockmarked with holes, muddy from spilled ale and trampled grass. Children run through the chaos, chasing stray dogs and stolen apples. You notice more than one mother scolding her son for playing too rough, or threatening to pull him from the games if he doesn't behave. For every winner there are a dozen losers nursing bruised shins and dented pride. The highlight of the evening is the tug of war, a spectacle that draws the whole village. Teams are chosen, alliances formed, rivalries renewed. The rope is thick, heavy and rough on the hands. On one side the smith's apprentices, on the other the bakers and millers. The crowd counts down and the struggle begins, a slow grinding battle of strength and will. Mud flies, shoes are lost, and someone inevitably falls face first into the muck, greeted by peals of laughter. When one team finally collapses, the victors are crowned with wreaths of wildflowers, the losers pelted with handfuls of grass. As the games wind down, you see the aftermath. Scraped knees, torn sleeves, a few bloodied noses. Some competitors limp off, arms around each other, already recounting the night's glory. Others slip away quietly, nursing their wounds and hoping to avoid their parents' notice. The festival healer is busiest now, handing out poultices and gentle scoldings in equal measure. Through it all, the games remain the festival's most beloved and feared tradition. They're a test of strength, cunning, and courage, but also of resilience in the face of pain. Some call them rites of passage, others just call them madness. You wonder if, years from now, the scars and stories will fade or only grow larger in the telling. As the last torch gutters out and the arena empties, you stand in the quiet, feeling the echoes of shouts and laughter still vibrating in your bones. Maybe you'll try your luck next year, if your shins ever recover. The festival square seems quieter for a moment, but you can feel the tension lingering in the air, a fizzing, nervous energy that builds as dusk slides toward night. The feasting has faded to a handful of determined drinkers. The bruised and battered competitors of the games have slumped in circles, retelling their glories. But above it all, a new sound crackles and snaps. Somewhere overhead, a burst of colour blooms against the deepening blue. "The fireworks!" someone shouts, and suddenly the crowds surge forward, faces upturned, eyes wide. Medieval fireworks are nothing like the ones you know. No slick choreography, no health and safety announcements, no crowd barriers or warning tape. Just a handful of wild-eyed men, hands stained with powder, racing around with torches and buckets of sand, their carts stacked with mysterious barrels and boxes. The festival pyrotechnicians are half heroes, half madmen, always greeted with both admiration and a little fear. You watch as they huddle together, muttering in a jumble of dialects, triple-checking fuses and arguing about the order of the display. "Last year's dragon set the hay bales on fire," one whispers, grinning as if that's half the fun. The show begins with a bone-jarring boom. The crowd gasps as a cascade of sparks fizzes into the sky. Reds, greens, a sullen blue that glimmers then fades. Kids squeal and dodge as burning cinders rain down. Adults clap and whistle, and the oldest villagers grumble about the good old days when fireworks cost less and lasted longer. But there's no denying the magic. For a few heartbeats, the town is transformed. Faces lit gold and silver, mouths open in wonder. A couple of boys risk sneaking closer, darting behind barrels for a better look, while their mothers shout half-hearted warnings, knowing full well the draw of danger is part of the spell. Yet behind that spectacle, the risks are ever present, hiding in plain sight. Fireworks in the Middle Ages are home-brewed, gunpowder mixed in battered pots, shells packed by hand, instructions passed down in whispers or scrawled in cryptic notes. The recipe changes with every festival. Sometimes the mixtures go off exactly as planned, a perfect dragon's breath, a ring of fiery stars. Other times, well, you notice the scars on the pyrotechnician's hands, the missing eyebrows, the nervous glances exchanged whenever a fuse seems too slow or a firework splutters instead of soaring. Historians still argue about how these medieval fireworks came to Europe. Some claim they arrived from the East with merchants and envoys, borrowed magic from China, remixed, and misunderstood by every town along the trade routes. Others say they sprang up independently, alchemists and tinkerers playing with sulphur and saltpeter until they stumbled onto something that went bang. There's a little truth in all of it. What's certain is that every festival wants its own display, even if that means hiring the Italian, a wandering firemaster whose language nobody speaks, but whose fireworks are legendary, and some say, haunted. The dangers are obvious, but never quite real until the moment things go wrong. Tonight, you watch a boy, maybe 13, maybe 15, coaxing a slow match along a row of rockets. His friends jeer from behind the carts, egging him on, and for a moment, it all seems like a lark. Then a rocket misfires, veering sideways into the crowd. Shouts scatter, people trip over benches, a cloak goes up in flames. The boy's father races over, dousing the fire with ale, cuffing his son before checking he's unharmed. The crowd's shock melts quickly into laughter, nervous, shaky, but grateful the disaster was small. There's a local saying, no fireworks, no festival, no risk, no story worth telling. In quieter corners, the festival's elders recall years when the fireworks brought more than just excitement. There was the great fire of St. Agnes's Fair, when a stray spark set the baker's roof alight and half the street burned before dawn, or the night the devil walked the festival, when a fireworks wagon exploded, scattering embers as far as the abbey fields. Some blame careless hands, others whisper about curses and unlucky stars. The truth, like the smoke, hangs in the air, impossible to pin down, impossible to forget. You wander past a group of musicians packing away their instruments, their faces smudged with soot from the powder blasts. Every year someone loses their hat, one jokes, plucking a scorched feather from his cap. Another offers you a piece of sugared fruit for luck, he says. You accept, sticky-fingered, feeling a strange solidarity with everyone else, whose heart skipped a beat when the rocket went astray. It's easy to forget, swept up in the wonder, just how much work goes into the show. The pyrotechnicians spend days before the festival mixing powders, carving moulds, tying off fuses. They argue over colours, shapes, the timing of the finale. Most know that, in the end, it's less about perfection than about survival. They hope for applause, but will settle for a show that ends without anyone missing a hand or a roof. The festival's best-kept secret is the silent display, the fireworks set off in the dead of night after the crowds have faded. These are for the organisers, the exhausted cooks and cleaners, the children too young or old to push through the throng. Sometimes the display is a simple ring of sparks. Other times, it's a single rocket fired in memory of someone lost during last year's festivities. You see a woman in black, face half-shadowed, lighting a lantern at the edge of the square as the last sparks fade. She doesn't cheer or weep, just stands silent, watching the smoke drift up to the stars. Among the crowd, you overhear stories about festival magic, how the right firework, launched at just the right moment, can bring good fortune for a year. Some people scramble for the spent shells, tucking them into pockets or threading them into necklaces. Others scoop up handfuls of ash, mixing it with honey to ward off illness. The children hoard the broken sticks and burnt-out fuses, using them as swords or magic wands until they're taken away by tired parents. There's always a little superstition at work. Some claim that the direction the smoke drifts predicts the coming harvest. East for bounty, west for storms. Others say that if a couple kisses beneath the first burst of colour, they'll marry before the next festival. And if the final rocket refuses to fly, best to keep your head down for the rest of the year. You catch sight of the festival priest standing at the edge of the crowd, crossing himself as each new blast goes up. Officially, the church is wary of fireworks. Too much noise, too many pagan overtones, not enough respect for the peace of the saints. Unofficially, the priest knows better than to challenge the tradition. Instead, he blesses the pyrotechnicians quietly, praying for their safety and perhaps his own roof. Somewhere on the margins, a group of scholars argues over the composition of the powder, scribbling notes and trading tiny paper cones filled with samples. Saltpeter from the coast burns cleaner, one insists, but you need charcoal from the old woods. They swap stories of failures, fountains that sputtered, dragons that fizzled, displays that vanished in a rainstorm. Their rivalry is half serious, half friendly, always tinged with the knowledge that next year one of them might finally discover the secret to a true blue firework, a feat so rare it's said to bring fame and fortune. You wander into the darkness behind the main square where the pyrotechnicians have set up camp. The air smells of sulphur and burnt sugar, and you can hear their laughter, low and tired, but triumphant. They tell stories of disasters averted, close calls, and the time a fox ran off with a string of firecrackers. There's camaraderie in the risk, a bond forged in smoke and light. The fireworks are over, but the echoes linger. The children replay the show in their games, imitating the swoosh and crackle with sticks and pebbles. The old men nurse their beers and recount the greatest displays from festivals past, each memory brighter and less dangerous in the retelling. The festival square is littered with burnt-out shells, the ground scorched and pockmarked, but the mood is jubilant. Tonight, at least, everyone survived. Historians still puzzle over the hold fireworks have on the medieval imagination. Some believe they offer a glimpse of the divine, a fleeting beauty, a reminder that life can be both terrifying and marvellous. Others think it's just the human love of spectacle, the need to court danger and test the limits of control. Either way, the festival wouldn't be the same without the fire and the risk. You linger a moment longer, watching as the last of the smoke twists away, the stars reappearing overhead. Somewhere, a lone musician begins a soft, slow tune on a flute, and for a little while, the world feels suspended between darkness and light, danger and wonder. You know that behind every explosion of colour, every cheer and gasp, there was a moment when everything could have gone wrong, a misfire, a forgotten fuse, a spark in the wrong place. But for tonight at least the festival's magic holds. The people begin to drift home, clutching their children and their lucky charms, humming the melody that hangs in the night air. The pyrotechnicians gather their tools, already planning next year's display, joking about how they'll top this one. Someone finds a burnt feather and declares it an omen of good luck. Another pockets a twisted bit of wire, a keepsake of survival. You follow the crowd, feeling the heat of the spent fireworks still buzzing in your bones, knowing you'll dream of light and colour and the sweet, sick risk that underpins every medieval festival night. And as you slip away, you realise the fireworks are more than a spectacle. They're a test, a promise, and a warning, all exploding at once in the wild, smoky dark. As the embers of the last firework fade into the night sky, the festival breathes out a long collective sigh. The noisy crowd starts to shift toward the open squares, where music thrums anew, but your attention is caught by a different kind of spectacle. Over by a cluster of crooked tents, a hush falls as a group of acrobats and jugglers, faces painted in brilliant colours, eyes rimmed in tired coal, step into the flickering torchlight. Their smiles are wide, their bows deep and dramatic. But you, a little wiser now, can't help but notice the stiffness in their movements, the wince hidden beneath every grand gesture. In the festival's tapestry of wonder, these are the threads most frayed. You watch as the acrobats tumble and leap, their bodies bending in ways that seem almost inhuman. Each feat draws gasps and scattered applause from the crowd. A boy no older than 8 flips over the back of a much taller man, landing neatly on his feet. The audience cheers, but you spot the boy's mother just beyond the firelight, hands twisting her apron, worry etched into every line of her face. When the boy stumbles and nearly falls, she sucks in her breath and only releases it when he bows with a flourish. Behind these breathtaking performances is a world rarely glimpsed. If you slip around the back of the tent, away from the crowds and the torches, you find the truth. Bandaged wrists, bruised knees, aching backs. The performers swap stories in low voices, sharing salves and stretches learned from bitter experience. It's not the flips that hurt, one juggler mutters, massaging his shoulder. It's the landings. Another, older than the rest, pulls off his boot to reveal swollen toes, nails blackened from countless hard falls. He shrugs when you ask if it hurts. Only when I'm not moving. Historians still debate how much choice these performers really had. Some say the best were celebrities, courted by nobles and granted safe passage from town to town. Others insist that most were closer to slaves than stars, born into troops, working for scraps, their injuries ignored in favour of spectacle. You can't eat applause, the old juggler says, but it's all we get some nights. Life behind the curtain is as much about survival as skill. The acrobats are up before dawn, stretching and rehearsing in whatever space they can claim. Sometimes a patch of muddy field, sometimes a barn cleared of animals for the day. Meals are snatched when they can be. Cold bread, cheese, maybe a hunk of meat if the crowd's generous with coins. It's not just the physical demands that wear them down. The pressure to wow each new audience is relentless. If a routine falls flat or a trick is missed, the crowd's mood turns quickly. Cheers replaced by jeers, coins withheld, the threat of being replaced ever present. The festival goers want danger. They want surprise. So every year, the tricks get riskier, the heights get higher, and the pain grows more constant. Sometimes a performance goes spectacularly wrong. You hear whispers of a juggler who dropped a flaming torch, setting his own tunic alight. The burns took weeks to heal, and he never quite regained the nerve to perform with fire again. Another story, told in sombre tones, is of an acrobat who fell from a rickety scaffold and broke his leg. There was no healer handy, only a carpenter who set the bone as best he could. The troupe passed a hat for alms, but the man never performed again. His limp, now a permanent part of his walk, is a quiet warning to the younger members. You watch a young girl, perhaps 10 or 11, balance on a rope strung between two wagons. She walks carefully, arms wide, eyes fixed straight ahead. Below, her father waits, ready to catch her if she slips. The crowd cheers, but you catch the flicker of relief in his eyes when she makes it across. Later in the darkness, you hear him whisper, "Next year she'll be too tall. We'll need a new act." It's a harsh truth. Performers must always outdo themselves, and youth is often the main attraction. Despite the pain and uncertainty, there's camaraderie in the troupe. They share everything: costumes, food, laughter, tears. After the show, they gather in a circle, passing a flask and retelling the night's mishaps as jokes. Someone juggles apples for the children, another tunes a battered lute, filling the camp with quiet music. In these moments, the performers are not just spectacle, they're family, bound by hardship and hope. In the crowd, you overhear a merchant explaining to his son how jugglers are masters of deception. The boy watches wide-eyed as a woman juggles knives, her hands a blur. "It's all in the wrists," she says with a wink, but her eyes are tired. When the show ends, she spends long minutes cleaning and sharpening the blades, her hands steady despite the fatigue. You wonder how many cuts and close calls she's hidden behind that easy grin. Not all performers are treated the same. Some townsfolk look down on acrobats and jugglers, dismissing them as vagabonds or worse. "They bring trouble," an old woman mutters, clutching her purse, but others are quick to defend them. "They're artists," shouts a baker, tossing a coin into the hat. "Better a little danger than another night of gossip." Among the troupe is a storyteller who works with shadows. By candlelight she casts figures against a canvas sheet: wolves, knights, princesses, all dancing at the flick of her nimble fingers. When the story ends, the children clap, and a few shyly offer the storyteller scraps of bread or dried fruit. She smiles, her eyes glistening, and tells them to always believe in shadows, because sometimes they hide the best parts of ourselves. A little further from the main tent, the strong man demonstrates his talents. He bends iron bars, lifts stones twice his size, and lets the bravest in the crowd try, and fail, to move his heavy weights. The children giggle as he roars like a bear, but later, you see him rubbing ointment into his aching arms, wincing as he wraps them in strips of linen. He tells a nearby child, "Strength isn't about never hurting. It's about getting up again, and again, and again." Not all the festival's spectacles are so honest. You overhear whispers of rigged acts, weights hollowed out, cards marked, tricks set up so the random volunteer is actually a planted assistant. The line between illusion and deception is thin, and while most laugh off a little trickery, others take offence if they feel truly fooled. Sometimes a crowd turns ugly, and the performers must pack up quickly, slipping away into the night before stones start flying. You remember a festival tale told by a travelling friar, how one acrobat, desperate to impress, attempted a leap no one had ever tried. The crowd held its breath as he soared, then gasped as he fell, landing hard. The friar's moral was that pride goes before a fall, but among performers, the lesson is simpler. Risk is the cost of applause. Historians still argue over whether these troops were respected or reviled. Some point to the generous gifts given by nobles, the invitations to perform at castles and grand feasts. Others recall laws that banned performers from sleeping within the town walls, fearing they'd bring theft or plague. The truth, as ever, is tangled. Some nights end with ovations and coins, others with the troupe chased from the square, jeered as they go. In quieter moments you see the softer side of the performers' lives. The youngest children chase fireflies, the older ones practice flips in the grass, laughter mingling with the night air. The leader of the troupe, a woman with silver streaks in her hair, tends to each member, binding a twisted ankle, soothing a crying child, reminding everyone that tomorrow is another chance to fly. When the moon rises high, she sings a lullaby, her voice low and rough, and the whole troupe gathers close. For a little while, even the pain fades. The festival crowd, well fed and dazzled, rarely sees this side. To them, the acrobats are untouchable, creatures of grace and daring, their troubles as fleeting as the show itself. But you know better now. You see the way a performer's smile slips when the lights go out, the way old scars glint in the torchlight, the tired hope in their eyes as they count the coins at the end of the night. As you leave the circle of tents, the music and laughter fade behind you. The acrobats bow one last time, their faces shining in the dying firelight. The show is over, but their pain and their joy linger long after the applause dies away. Tonight you'll remember their courage, the price of wonder, and the quiet strength that lets them rise, again and again, into the uncertain light of another festival dawn. The sounds of laughter and applause ripple through the festival air, weaving around you as you leave the ring of jugglers and acrobats behind. But as you step into the twisting alleys of the fairground, the mood shifts again. The music grows sharper, edged with a nervous urgency. You're drawn to the rows of merchant stalls, lanterns swinging overhead, tables piled high with sweetmeats, trinkets, and promises. Here, the spirit of celebration is tinged with a ruthless undercurrent. For every smiling face there's a calculating glance. Every friendly greeting hides a silent wager. It's time to face another truth about medieval festivals, the world of the festival merchant, where profit is king and compassion is often left behind. Merchants at the festival arrive days before the banners are even raised. They jostle for the best spaces, bribing organisers or sweet-talking officials to get a coveted spot near the main square or the chapel. You overhear a heated argument between two vendors. One accuses the other of encroaching by a hand's breadth. The matter is resolved only when a silver coin changes hands, quickly, discreetly, as if the real contest is not the wares themselves but the right to display them. You marvel at the variety on offer. Brightly dyed scarves and ribbons flutter in the wind, catching the light like jewels. A woman hawks candied nuts, the scent sticky sweet, while her daughter quietly slips samples into the hands of children who look like they couldn't afford a single treat. There's a potter with stacks of glazed jugs, everyone unique, or so he claims, and a blacksmith demonstrating his miniature horseshoes, clinking them together as he chants about good luck and long life. But beneath the noise and colour, you sense a different energy. A merchant in a faded green tunic beckons you closer, voice low and conspiratorial. For you, friend, a special price. Today only. He eyes your purse, weighing what you might spend. You glance at his wares, combs, beads, cheap knives, wondering if the silver rings are truly silver, if the spices in his sacks are as rare as he claims. From the east these are, he insists, pushing a bag of pepper into your palm. The price he whispers is outrageous. When you set it down, he shrugs. For you then, half. Walk away, and you hear him call the same offer to the next traveller, voice never changing. Festival trade is as much performance as it is commerce. The best merchants know how to craft a story. This shawl was woven by the widow of a knight, says the clothier, eyes wide with practised sorrow. This brooch, blessed by the bishop himself. One vendor claims to sell relics, splinters of the true cross, bones of saints, vials of holy water that glint suspiciously like the stream you passed on your way into town. The crowds are drawn in by the drama, their hands as quick as their scepticism is slow. You watch as a toothless peddler sells a love charm to a blushing young woman who tucks it into her bodice and dares a hopeful glance at a passing apprentice. Historians still argue about how much of this was outright fraud and how much was simply the carnival spirit. Everyone, after all, expects a little trickery at a festival. Buyer beware is an ancient motto, but here it feels like a challenge as much as a warning. Some say festival merchants drove innovation, spreading new goods and new ideas from town to town. Others see them as predators, circling for weakness, growing fat on the hopes of the desperate. There's a market for everything. One corner of the fair bristles with herbalists and healers, all promising miracle cures, elixirs for love, powders for pain, ointments to bring luck or banish nightmares. A mother kneels before a wizened woman, begging for something to ease her child's cough. The woman mutters, mixes, and hands over a bottle. The price is steep, but the mother pays, hope flickering in her tired eyes. Nearby a man sells cures for baldness, a thick, foul-smelling paste that's as likely to stain your scalp as grow new hair. Some festival-goers swear by these remedies, others mutter about snake oil and sorcery. The healer's hands are always busy, her smile always fixed. You notice the tricks merchants use to draw crowds. A crier with a booming voice spins tales of wonder, a boy lets a trained mouse run up his arm, a woman juggles apples while shouting out prices. The competition is fierce, the tricks relentless. When a rival merchant's stand is suddenly deserted, you hear muttered accusations. Someone spread a rumour about mouldy bread or a cursed stall. Reputation is fragile. One careless whisper can ruin a day's takings. Some of the most ruthless dealings happen behind closed tents. There, in the shadowy half-light, coins and goods change hands in secret. A scribe offers to forge documents, a letter of introduction, a bill of sale, a fake blessing from a bishop. A jeweller quietly removes the gold from a ring, replacing it with polished brass. An old man tries to pawn off an heirloom sword, whose blade is nicked and rusted, the blood stain suspiciously fresh. Every deal is a gamble, every customer a potential mark. You see the toll the festival takes on the merchants. The days are long, the crowds relentless, the weather unpredictable. A sudden rainstorm can ruin silks and wash away painted signs. A hot sun spoils butter and sweets, melts beeswax candles, sours the mood of both buyer and seller. By nightfall, some merchants look exhausted, their voices hoarse, their smiles brittle. But others thrive in the chaos, their eyes alive with the thrill of the bargain. For some, the festival is a rare chance to escape poverty. Children work alongside their parents, learning how to haggle, how to spot a thief, how to feign outrage when a customer tries to bargain too low. You see a young girl, barely 10, weaving through the crowd with a basket of sweet rolls, shouting out prices with the confidence of a veteran. Later, you spot her curled up behind her mother's stall, counting coins with a smile that speaks of hope as much as fatigue. Theft is a constant risk. Festival thieves are as skilled as the best merchants, slipping hands into purses, lifting apples, even switching entire sacks when a vendor turns his back. Some vendors employ guards, burly men who glare at anyone lingering too long. Others rely on cunning, setting out decoy purses, sprinkling pepper on their wares to catch a sneezing thief, tying bells to their coin bags. Still, you see a pickpocket chase through the crowd, a butcher's knife gleaming as the merchant roars after him. The crowd cheers, secretly delighted at the drama. Historians still debate whether medieval markets were centres of trust or nests of deceit. Some point to strict guild regulations, the presence of town officials and harsh punishments for fraud. Others see the chaos and the ingenuity of the merchants as proof that the festival was a world apart, a place where the rules bent and everyone had to fend for themselves. Beneath the ruthless energy is a kind of camaraderie. When the sun sets and the crowds thin, the merchants gather to swap stories, share food and laugh at the day's near disasters. They pass wine, break bread and compare bruises, literal and financial. One merchant toasts to fools and fortune, and the others roar approval, clinking cups and trading the names of the worst customers and the best deals. As you wander through the closing stalls, you see the detritus of the day, broken pottery, spilled grain, bits of ribbon trampled into the mud. Some merchants pack up, counting their coins and cursing their luck. Others linger, savouring the last chance for a deal. You pass a tired old man who offers you a cracked bowl for just a song, and when you hum a tune, he gives you the bowl with a wink, saying, "A fair trade, music for memories." You realise that, for all the ruthless dealings and cutthroat tricks, the festival market is also a place of hope. Here, fortunes are made and lost in a heartbeat. A single lucky sale can mean a warm winter, a full belly, a future. You see it in the tired but determined faces of the vendors, in the shy pride of children counting coins, in the quiet relief of a mother who sells the last of her bread just as the sun slips behind the trees. By night's end, the market square is quieter. The lanterns flicker, casting long shadows over the tables. The last merchants gather their wares, some with heavy hearts, others with secret smiles. Tomorrow the fair will move on, the square swept clean, but the stories of cunning, hope, and ruthless resolve will linger long after the stalls are gone. You've barely caught your breath from the dizzying energy of the merchant rows when a new procession winds through the dusk-lit square. A throng of children, faces shining with hope, eyes wide with the excitement of a night that, for once, belongs to them. They're everywhere at these festivals, running between legs, clutching sticky treats, gathering at the foot of every spectacle with the hungry anticipation of those who rarely get centre stage. At first glance, it all seems innocent, childhood joy in its purest form. But you soon notice the quiet transactions unfolding between laughter and applause, the subtle pressure shaping every performance. Tonight, behind the bright banners and painted smiles, you see the double-edged role of children at the medieval festival, adored by the crowds, but exploited in ways few want to see. There's the dancing troupe, a dozen girls and boys, all ribbons and bare feet, whirling in a circle while the crowd claps and throws pennies. The youngest, cheeks streaked with paint, looks barely more than 6. Her smile is fixed, determined. Each leap and twirl draws admiring cheers, but when she stumbles and falls, the applause turns briefly to laughter. You see her bite her lip, fight tears, and quickly scramble to her feet to rejoin the dance. Her mother, watching from the edge, presses a hand to her chest, a silent prayer hidden behind her festival smile. Children are everywhere, sweeping the sawdust paths, carrying trays of sweets, helping set up games, and even manning stalls when their parents slip away for a moment of rest. Some are apprentices, learning a family trade, others are pressed into service by relatives or by the wealthier townsfolk who hire extra hands just for the festival. You spot a boy in patched clothes, arms full of firewood, staggering toward a distant cook fire. He glances nervously at the grown men nearby, who laugh and toss crumbs at him as if he were another stray dog sniffing for scraps. Historians still argue about how much agency these children had. Were they eager to help, proud to play a role, or simply caught in the current of adult ambition? There's no single answer. Some children clearly relish the attention, basking in the glow of approval, dreaming of coins dropped into their hands. Others seem smaller somehow, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, already learning to hide their aches behind painted faces. A storyteller sets up near a circle of children, drawing them close with promises of dragons and lost kingdoms. The crowd gathers, coin purse at the ready. When the tale is over, it's the children who pass the hat. Voices sweet as honey. Spare a penny for the story. Their charm is irresistible, and the hat fills quickly. Later, you see them slip half the coins to the storyteller, tucking the rest away. Payment for the chance to be part of the act, or perhaps just a well-learned lesson in the festival's unofficial rules. Some of the most popular performances feature children as wonders. There's a boy billed as the littlest strongman, grunting as he lifts a pair of small hollowed-out weights. The crowd laughs, some cheering, others tossing coins. When the boy's father calls for applause, you see a quick, proud glance, equal parts love and calculation. In another corner, a girl with a voice like an angel sings for a crowd of merchants. She bows after every song, collecting coins until her voice cracks and her hands tremble. The festival is filled with rituals for children, the crowning of a festival princess, the game of catch the garland, the old tradition of sending the youngest child through the crowd to gather blessings, or sometimes to beg for treats. Some parents dress their children in borrowed finery, hoping they'll catch the eye of a rich merchant or a noblewoman. Maybe she'll find a good position, you hear a mother whisper, fussing with her daughter's hair, or someone who'll take her as an apprentice. Even joy, you realise, has a price. Yet not all is bleak. You see children squealing with real delight, chasing each other between tents, inventing their own games with scraps of cloth and sticks, trading stories and sweets. For many, the festival is a rare chance to escape chores, to see marvels and magicians, to feel, if only for a night, like anything is possible. but the line between joy and labour is razor thin. As night deepens, you find a group of exhausted children dozing under a cart, legs tangled, arms around each other. They're roused by a sharp voice, a parent or master, who pulls them up and pushes them toward another task. You hear one boy mutter, "Just a little longer, then we can sleep." His sister nods, eyes already closing again. The festival, with all its light, casts long shadows too. You watch a troop of boys rehearsing a play behind one of the larger tents. The director, a gaunt man with quick hands, barks orders as they stumble through their lines. The play is rough, the props battered, but the audience will see none of that when the curtain rises. The boys glance at each other, competing for the best parts, but also sharing nervous smiles and whispered encouragements. When one forgets a line and earns a slap, you see the other boys flinch. The show must go on, but not everyone will make it to the final bow. There's another kind of exploitation here too, the festival's penchant for oddities. A set of twins with unusually pale hair are paraded as moon children, their every move watched, their every word treated as a marvel. Nearby, a girl with a twisted foot dances on a platform, her difference transformed into entertainment for the curious. The coins pile up, but you wonder what happens when the festival ends and the attention fades. Some children, you sense, will never be allowed to forget the roles they played. There are moments of protection too. You see a group of mothers huddled around a baby, shielding her from the rowdier parts of the crowd. A group of older girls shares bread and stories, looking after the youngest in their care. One father pulls his son out of a dangerous game, scolding him with a mix of fear and relief. For every child pushed too hard, another is gently pulled back, cradled in a love that tries, if imperfectly, to soften the blows. As the night grows colder, you notice a line of tired children waiting to be paid. Their employers, sometimes parents, sometimes not, hand out coins, not always fairly. Some children argue, demanding what was promised. Others accept whatever they're given, counting the coins with practiced resignation. A few clutch their earnings with pride, already planning what to buy. A sweet, a ribbon, a precious day without chores. Others tuck the coins into their pockets and drift away, too tired even for hope. You pass a group of young apprentices packing up a merchant's stall, their laughter fading as the work drags on. One boy sings a silly song, the others join in, their voices wavering but determined. They finish just as the last lanterns are snuffed out, and their master tosses them each a crust of bread. "That's all for tonight," he says, but the boys still smile, proud to have done their part. You can't help but wonder what these children will remember when they're old. Will it be the taste of honey cakes, the cheers of the crowd, the thrill of a new game at dusk? Or will it be the bruises, the exhaustion, the sharpness of a promise broken? Maybe, like so much of the festival, it will be both. A tangled knot of joy and pain, hope and sacrifice. Historians still argue about the meaning of all this. Did the festival give children a glimpse of the world's possibilities? Or did it simply introduce them to its harshest lessons a little too soon? Was the laughter genuine, the applause a gift, or just another weight to carry home? As you watch the last of the children slip away into the shadows hand in hand, you're left with the simplest, oldest wish of all. That, for at least one night, every child will find a warm place to sleep and a little kindness to remember, long after the festival's lights have faded. The night presses on, its edges worn soft by lantern light and laughter, but somewhere in the square a new hush settles, a thickening silence that tastes of anticipation and dread. The energy shifts as a motley crowd gathers around a hastily built wooden platform, its boards warped and splintered, looming over the muddy square. For all the joy, the revelry, the wild celebration, there's an ancient, darker undercurrent that medieval festivals never quite shake, the spectacle of public justice. It's not just about bread and games, it's also about power. Tonight, you see firsthand how, for centuries, punishment and pain became the most brutal, magnetic entertainment of all. A crier's voice slices through the crowd, sonorous and unyielding. "All gather! The sentence will be carried out. by the will of the council, by the wisdom of the saints. You're swept forward, pressed in by villagers craning to see. A nervous giggle trickles through the children at your side. Some clutch at their mother's hands, others look wide-eyed, not sure if they should cheer or shiver. You sense how the promise of justice has a strange pull, mixing fear and fascination in every heart. Tonight's entertainment is a pair of thieves. 2 boys barely older than the apprentices you saw earlier, hands bound with rough rope. They're hauled up onto the platform, their faces pale and defiant. A burly constable reads the charges: stealing bread, disturbing the peace, resisting arrest. The crowd murmurs. Some scowl, others shrug. A few mutter that the baker charges too much anyway. The justice to be served tonight is not so simple, and everyone knows it. There's a grim ritual to the proceedings. The festival crowd, drunk on spectacle, becomes judge and jury by their jeers or mercy. Some cheer when the boys are forced to their knees, others look away, uncomfortable. The local priest steps up, invoking saints and sermons, promising that punishment cleanses the soul. The boys barely listen, their eyes darting to the faces in the crowd, looking perhaps for family or just a little pity. Medieval punishments are as varied as they are cruel. Tonight it's the pillory, a wooden frame with holes for head and hands, meant to hold its victim upright, exposed, powerless. You watch as the boys are locked in place. The crowd edges closer, eager for the next act. The crier hands out rotten vegetables to the children, carrots and turnips gone soft, a few eggs, all perfect for hurling at the shamed. There's a perverse kind of glee as the first missiles fly, splattering the boys with muck. Some in the crowd roar with laughter, others look away, a flicker of shame on their faces. Historians still argue whether these punishments were effective deterrents, or if they simply fueled more resentment and rebellion. Some sources describe justice festivals, where the punishment was meant to restore the balance of the community, to warn others against crime. Others point to the way these events became blood sport, fuel for the crowd's darker urges, a chance for the powerless to feel strong for a moment at someone else's expense. The debate lingers, just like the echoes of laughter and jeers. As the boys endure the barrage, the spectacle grows rowdier. A drunkard shouts a slurred insult. A baker's wife tosses a cabbage, missing by a mile but grinning with satisfaction. The local fool, still in motley from earlier games, performs an exaggerated bow before the pillory, mugging for the crowd and earning a round of applause. The line between justice and jest is paper-thin. You notice, too, those who slip away, unable or unwilling to watch. An old woman mutters a prayer for mercy. A group of children, bored by the slow cruelty, drift off toward the last embers of a puppet show. Yet others are drawn in, rapt. A young man brags he'll be next to throw, while a sullen apprentice steals a turnip just to join in. The festival amplifies everything: kindness, cruelty, and the urge to belong. The punishments grow more elaborate as the night wears on. There's the cucking stool, a dunking chair for those accused of gossip or unwomanly behaviour. The crowd cheers as a protesting woman is strapped in and dunked, shrieking into a barrel of cold, filthy water. The constables drag her out, dripping and gasping, only to lower her again when the cheers grow thin. It's a spectacle, but also a warning. Behave, or you'll join her next year. You see young girls in the front row, faces set with both fear and fascination. You wonder what lessons will settle in their bones after tonight. For more serious crimes, or when the mood is right for drama, the stocks are brought out. The guilty are forced to stand, legs and arms trapped, sometimes for hours. Anyone can come up and jeer, poke, spit, or pelt them with filth. Sometimes local musicians play nearby, adding a cruel soundtrack to the misery. One unlucky man, caught poaching a rabbit, stands in the stocks as children chant rhymes and grown men wager on how long he'll last before fainting. The crowd laughs, but you catch the haunted look in his eyes. Sometimes the justice is harsher still. A pickpocket caught at dusk is marched through the square by torchlight, a bell tied around his neck to announce his crime. The crowd follows, a noisy, unpredictable beast, tossing insults and stones in equal measure. Let that be a lesson, the crier proclaims, but you wonder if the lesson is truly learned, or if instead it just teaches everyone how thin the line is between watcher and watched. There's a ritual of mercy too, though it rarely matches the cruelty. Sometimes a condemned person is granted one last word. You watch a trembling girl, accused of stealing a ribbon, who stammers out a plea for forgiveness. The crowd hushes, torn between pity and habit. Someone tosses her a coin, another shouts, "Let her go!" The constable consults with the council, and in a rare twist the girl is freed, running sobbing into the shadows. The mood shifts again. Some cheer, others jeer, but a sense of unease lingers. Justice, you realise, is fickle, a performance as much as the puppet shows and acrobats. Historians still puzzle over the paradox of festival justice. Some believe these rituals gave the community a sense of control, a release valve for anger and fear. Others see only cruelty, a culture that treats pain as play, turning suffering into spectacle. The truth, perhaps, is that it was always both. You overhear a group of townsfolk debating a sentence handed down earlier in the day. "It's too harsh," one says. "He only took a loaf." Another shakes her head. "Stealing is stealing. If you're soft now, you'll wake up with nothing." The arguments echo, unresolved, long after the crowd disperses. In the shadows near the platform, you spot a woman comforting her daughter, who covers her ears and buries her face in her mother's cloak. "It's just how things are," the woman whispers. "Be good, and you'll never stand up there." You hear the doubt in her voice. Even she knows it's not always that simple. As the punishments end, the festival returns to its lighter mood. But you notice that the laughter is quieter, tinged with something bitter. The platform remains for a while, its presence a silent threat. Even as the music and dance resume, everyone remembers the lesson, whether spoken or unspoken. At a medieval festival, justice is never far from brutality. You pass by the pillory again, now empty, its wood slick with sweat and spit. A group of boys dares each other to stick their heads through the holes, playing at what they saw earlier. Their mothers scold them, but the game is already set. Tonight's spectacle will shape next year's stories, next year's fears. It's easy to forget in the warmth of feasting and the thrill of games, just how close pain always is to pleasure at these festivals. The boundary between celebration and punishment is as thin as the curtain behind the puppet show, as fragile as the rope holding up the banners. You leave the platform behind, your mind troubled. The music and laughter beckon you onward, promising a return to the comforts of food and dance. But you carry the image of the pillory with you, a reminder that even in celebration shadows linger. In the end, the most brutal part of the medieval festival may not be the games or the fireworks, but the way justice is handed out, with all the world watching, hearts divided between vengeance and mercy, cruelty and compassion. You wander from the pillory and stocks, the bitter taste of spectacle justice still lingering, but soon the roar of a different crowd draws you onward, up the winding street, toward the festival's makeshift tournament grounds. Here, on a patch of churned earth and trampled grass, the promise of glory hangs heavy in the air. At the heart of every great medieval festival lies its grandest dream, the tournament. For the lucky few, this means jousts, duels, and feats of arms beneath banners that flutter like wild birds in the wind. But behind the pageantry and applause, you begin to see the bruises, the sweat, the hungry ambition, and the hidden toll these battles take on all who dare step into the ring. The ground is a muddy, battered stage. Splinters of broken lances litter the edges. Banners, some brilliant, some patched and faded, snap overhead, painted with the devices of local lords or of ambitious mercenaries hungry for a patron. The air rings with the clang of steel, the shouted taunts of squires, the cheers and jeers of a crowd hungry for action. You watch as knights, armoured but more often patched together than gleaming, parade before the assembled, their horses draped in festival colours. They raise their lances and salute, but even from a distance you can see the nerves in their faces, the stiffness of old wounds. For many, the tournament is the true centrepiece of festival week. Every local boy dreams of besting a rival. Every squire eyes his master's shield. Every merchant hopes his gifts will buy the favour of a rising champion. The rules are strict on paper. No lethal blows, no duelling after sundown, no striking a man who's lost his helm. But the rules, like the ground, are easily muddied. Today's friendly contest can sour quickly into a brawl, and the crowd loves nothing more than when the line between sport and grudge dissolves in the heat of battle. You catch the beginning of a joust, a pair of knights, one resplendent in battered silver, the other in borrowed chain, charging each other down the narrow lane. Their lances crash in an explosion of splinters. The crowd erupts. One man topples hard, his horse rearing. Squires rush to his side, dragging him from the mud. He limps, waving off help, determined to play the hero. His opponent circles, arms raised, basking in the wave of applause. Yet when the crowd's attention drifts, you notice both men clutching at their arms and ribs, faces twisted in pain. Tournament life is a series of small humiliations and private victories. The knights camp in rough tents at the field's edge, eating cold meat and stale bread, tending their bruises with wine and the camaraderie of old wounds. You hear them grumble about unfair matches, bent swords, borrowed armour that never quite fits. They compare scars and share rumours, who's sleeping in whose tent, whose purse is lighter after a bad bet, which local lord favours dirty tricks. The talk is rough, but there's a loyalty in it too, a shared understanding that tomorrow any one of them could fall. Historians still debate what tournaments truly meant to the medieval world. Some call them training grounds for war, a way to keep knights sharp, lords prepared for battle, peasants awed by the spectacle of chivalry. Others see them as raw theatre, less about skill than about drama, pride, and politics. There's truth in both. For every rule, a story. A nobleman who wins a bride with a perfect strike. A penniless knight who rides out on a borrowed steed, wins 3 bouts, then disappears into the crowd with his prize. A squire who, after years of fetching water and patching wounds, finally dons armour himself, only to be knocked flat in his first charge. Beneath the celebration there's always danger. The joust is only the most famous of the tournament games. You watch a melee, dozens of men, armed with wooden clubs and dulled blades, batter each other in a chaotic free-for-all. The crowd surges and shouts as bodies slam and tumble, dust flying. The rules, such as they are, dissolve in the crush. Men fall hard, some dragged away unconscious, others limping off on twisted ankles, hands to bloodied faces. The healer's tent is crowded all day. Split lips, black eyes, broken noses, and the odd rib poking where it shouldn't. All in good fun, says a toothless old knight spitting blood into the grass. You notice the lesser-known heroes of the field, the squires, pages, and grooms who keep the tournament running. They rise before dawn to feed horses, oil armour, fetch water, and patch torn surcoats. Many are no older than 12, already bearing scars from hoof kicks and careless swings. They run messages, soothe tempers, and sometimes hide from the worst of the violence. For them, the festival is less glory and more grind, a test of endurance, a lesson in patience and fear. A page loses a finger to a wayward blade. A squire is trampled while trying to rein in a frightened horse. Some dream of one day entering the lists themselves, but most just hope to make it through with all their limbs intact. The crowd's hunger for drama is insatiable. Bets are placed on every bout. Who will fall first? Whose shield will shatter? Which knight will unhorse the reigning champion? The tavern near the field does a brisk trade in ale and rumour. Losers drown their sorrows, winners strut and boast. When tempers flare, it's not uncommon for an argument to spill over into a real fight. Last year, an infamous brawl between 2 rival squires ended with both in the stocks, and their masters forced to pay fines to keep them from being expelled from the lists. Yet for all the blood and bravado, the tournament is also a place of desperate hope. You see a young knight, his armour too big and his purse too thin, kneeling in the grass to pray before his bout. His squire stands behind him, offering whispered encouragement. When the knight loses, hard, his squire helps him to his feet, dusts him off, and assures him that next year you'll win. It's a small mercy in a world where so much rides on the swing of a lance or the luck of a draw. For women, the tournament is another sort of stage. Some are spectators, some prize givers, others quietly staking coins on favourites behind their husbands' backs. The bolder ones present favours, scarves or ribbons, for knights to wear on their helms, a tradition that blends courtly romance with sly politics. More than one match is decided by a pointed glance or a whispered promise. In the evenings, the tournament grounds turn into a marketplace of flirtation, secrets traded as readily as wagers. Sometimes tragedy strikes. A knight is unhorsed and does not rise. A squire is kicked in the head by a panicked steed. There are whispered prayers, the crowd suddenly hushed. A priest is called to give last rites. The lists are cleared, the banners lowered, but the festival carries on, swallowing sorrow in another round of music and drink. You overhear a mother warning her son, "Glory's never worth a grave." The boy shrugs. He's already watching the next bout, dream still bright behind his eyes. Historians still debate whether tournaments brought people together or drove them apart. Some say the shared spectacle forged community bonds, taught respect for courage and skill. Others point to the resentments that lingered. Grudges nursed, debts unpaid, rivals sworn to outdo each other next time. There's a story from every town. A knight who never forgave a broken promise, a squire who turned to banditry after being disgraced, a champion whose luck ran out just when he needed it most. In quieter corners, you see the personal cost. Knights binding up old wounds, squires cleaning blood from borrowed armour, healers shaking their heads at injuries that will ache all winter. The crowd remembers the winners, but the losers carry the bruises home, to be nursed in private until the next festival comes around. A few vow to never compete again. Most know they'll be back, drawn to the mud and the madness like moths to fire. As dusk settles and the last bout ends, the tournament field empties. Knights and squires limp toward their tents, some with coins jangling, others with nothing but new scars. The banners come down, the armour is packed away, but the stories ripple outward. You hear boasts in the tavern, murmurs in the market, children repeating the names of their new heroes. Tomorrow the field will be empty, the churned earth smoothed by wind and rain. The festival will move on, but the memory of the fights, the thrill, the pain, the hope, will linger, etched into the bones of the town and everyone who watched or fought. For a brief, blazing moment, the tournament turned ordinary men and women into legends. For most, though, it was a lesson in limits, a reminder that behind every victory is 100 quiet defeats, every moment of glory paid for in bruises and risk. And as you leave the tournament grounds, the cheers and laments fading behind you, you understand what every medieval festival goer knew. The path to glory is brutal, but it's the hope, the wild, reckless hope, that keeps everyone coming back. As you slip away from the battered tournament field, still echoing with the clangor of the arms and the boasting of bruised champions, the pulse of the festival lures you back toward the city's inner squares. The sounds change here. No more the crash of steel or the raucous bellow of jousting fans, but the rhythmic thump of drums, the high, sweet notes of pipes, and above all, the steady beat of 100 feet pounding the flagstones in time. It's the hour of dancing, and though on the surface it glimmers with unrestrained joy, you soon see how pain and hardship swirl beneath every twirl and leap. In the world of festival dances and traditions, no one leaves the square quite as whole as they arrived. Lanterns cast gold and orange across the square, transforming mud and cobbles into a stage. At the centre, a circle has formed. Villagers and travellers joining hands, faces flushed with excitement and wine. You're swept in before you can object, pressed shoulder to shoulder with strangers. The dance master, a wiry man with a booming laugh, shouts instructions: left, right, around, again. His voice is cheered, but you see how his smile flickers when someone stumbles or misses a step. Perfection is expected. Mistakes are corrected with a scowl or worse, a sharp rap on the knuckles with a wooden baton. The first round is easy, a chain dance, slow and stately. Old women shuffle, children giggle, a handful of young men show off with elaborate spins. But as the pace quickens, so does the risk. The dancers tug you into a whirl, skirts and sleeves flying, shoes slipping on spilled cider. The steps grow more complex, stamping, jumping, clapping overhead. One girl, carried away by the rhythm, trips and crashes into the circle's edge, drawing a gasp from the crowd. She laughs it off, rubbing her ankle, but you spot the tears she wipes away when no one is watching. Dancing is more than diversion here. It's a kind of test. Each village, each trade, even each family has its own signature move or sequence, and competition is fierce. The butcher's boys stomp out a pounding rhythm, the weavers slip and slide with surprising grace, the miller's daughters whirl so fast their braids whip the air. When rival groups face off, the circle becomes an arena, the audience a chorus of critics and fans. The best are cheered, the clumsy teased mercilessly. You notice bruises blooming on shins and elbows, sprained wrists hidden by borrowed ribbons, sweat stains growing dark beneath fine clothes. There's a tradition too of endurance dances, marathons that last for hours, sometimes all night. Couples lock arms and whirl until only the strongest, or most stubborn, are left standing. You watch a blacksmith and his wife, their faces red but determined, refusing to yield as other pairs drop out, limp away or collapse in giggles. In the end, when they finally stagger to a halt, the applause is thunderous. The prize is little. A loaf of sweet bread, a crown of wild flowers, but the glory is real, and so is the ache that will linger in their muscles for days. Not every dance is so inclusive. The nobles and their guests hold a private gathering inside the town hall, far from the mud and noise. Their music is slower, the steps rehearsed and elegant, the rules unyielding. Outsiders peek through open windows, envious or contemptuous, while inside lords and ladies measure each other with glances as much as with steps. For the highborn, the dance is less about joy than about politics, a way to display wealth, to hint at alliances, to spark or quash rumours. You notice how often the partners switch, how many whispers pass between turns. A misstep here is more dangerous than a bruised toe. It could mean a missed opportunity, a broken promise, a slight not soon forgotten. Yet even among the nobility, pain is ever present, if more carefully disguised. A countess winces as her partner treads on her foot. An old knight coughs behind his hand. Two rivals glare daggers across the floor. You realise, watching from the shadows, that every smile at court is sharpened with secrets, every dance a contest in disguise. The festival's wildest tradition is the midsummer frolic, a dance open to all, noble, peasant, outsider, and outcast. Here, masks are worn, faces hidden, identities blurred. The music is fast, the mood reckless. Partners spin and switch at random, hands grasping strangers, laughter rising wild and loud. There's a sense of freedom, but also of risk. Old grudges flare, lovers quarrel, jealousies boil over in the space of a single tune. A farmer in a wolf mask twirls with a veiled noblewoman, only for her husband to recognise the gesture and stalk away, fuming. Later, you see him sulking near the cider barrels, rubbing his jaw where a rival accidentally clipped him with an elbow. The aftermath of the dances is never as pretty as the performance. Blisters and bruises, aching joints, sprained ankles. These are the festival's secret souvenirs. The town healer does brisk business, bandaging feet and brewing teas for sore muscles. You watch a girl weep as her mother rubs balm into her swollen ankle. Her dreams of dancing until dawn ended by a careless step. For the rest of her life, the story of this festival will be told with a wry smile. I nearly flew until I fell. Historians still debate whether these dances forged community or simply revealed its cracks. Some say the circle is a place where all are equal, at least for a song. Others point to the pecking order that emerges, who gets invited, who's left out, who's mocked or admired. Sometimes fights break out, a drunken rivalry, a misunderstood touch, an old feud reignited by too much wine and not enough forgiveness. The festival constable keeps a wary eye, ready to step in before things get out of hand, but rarely does. The square, for a night, polices itself. At the margins, those left out make their own fun. You find a group of children inventing a dance with sticks and pebbles, their laughter rising above the music. A trio of older women share a slow, gentle round. The steps our mothers taught us, they say, eyes gleaming with memory. Two young men, rebuffed by their sweethearts, start a comic jig, exaggerated and clumsy, drawing a fresh round of laughter from the crowd. Even outside the circle, the need to move, to belong, to be seen, is irresistible. As the night deepens, a kind of exhaustion sets in. The dancers grow slower, their movements heavy but contented. Couples slip away into the shadows, breathless and laughing. Friends collapse onto benches, comparing aches and triumphs. The music softens, pipes giving way to quiet strings, the drums fading to a gentle heartbeat. The dance master, his face shiny with sweat, raises a last toast, to feet that still move and hearts that still hope. There are always those who push too far. You see a young man who won't leave the floor, even as his limp worsens, determined to impress a girl who's already left. Another drinks too much, staggers, and is carried off by friends. Yet even these small tragedies become part of the festival's lore. Stories to be retold next year, proof that for one wild night, the ordinary rules were bent and everyone got to be extraordinary, if only for a song. As you finally slip away, legs tired and heart pounding, you carry the rhythm of the dance with you, a reminder of the joy and pain woven into every step, every leap, every fall. At a medieval festival, the dance is never just a dance. It is a contest, a courtship, a confession, a prayer. And when the music fades and the lanterns die, it's the memory of these moments, the shared exhaustion, the fleeting connection, the ache and the laughter that linger long after the rest of the world returns to stillness. The festival winds through the hours, not merely a river of spectacle, but a churning sea of unseen labour. With each round of applause for a dancer or cheer for a night, there's an unspoken chorus of groans and sighs just out of earshot, the invisible world of craftsmen, builders, decorators, cooks and menders who prop up the glittering facade of celebration. You start to notice it now, with the party in full swing. The harried faces in the shadows, the calloused hands working quietly by candlelight. The medieval festival's beating heart is its craftspeople, whose secret hardships are woven into every banner, every loaf, every gleaming sword and painted cart that parades through the city's crowded lanes. In the morning before the festival's first bell, they were already awake. You remember seeing the blacksmith's forge glowing red in the blue pre-dawn, hammers ringing out like distant thunder. He wipes his brow, sweat streaking the soot as his apprentice turns the bellows. Horseshoes, hinges, decorative spikes for the palisade, all hammered into shape, all demanded by noon. The blacksmith laughs when you ask how he keeps going, then winces as he flexes swollen knuckles. Ale and pride, lad, that's all. You wander through the craftsman's quarter, less an official section, and more a cluster of battered tents, every square foot filled with tools and wares. Carpenters set up booths, their hands nimble as they carve intricate flowers into trestle tables, or whittle wooden spoons for the market. Each craftsman guards their tricks jealously, hiding flaws with a smear of wax, smoothing splinters with fingers numb from years of the same motion. You watch one, old and hunched, shave a plank to perfect smoothness. When he thinks no one's looking, he flexes his hand, blowing warmth onto fingers stiff with the ache of age and use. Potters sit in the dust, surrounded by jugs, mugs and bowls, each painted in bold glazes. Some have already cracked from the festival's rush. The kiln was too hot, or too many pieces crowded the fire. A young woman stacks her best bowls on a cloth, hands trembling with pride. but you overhear her mutter that if she doesn't sell enough, she won't eat well this winter. Her father, missing 2 fingers from a long-ago accident, quietly swaps out a chipped jug for one he deems fit for a lord. Appearance, he tells you with a wink, is everything tonight. Behind the baker's stall, a half-dozen women knead dough, their hands white with flour, arms thick and strong from years of labour. They joke and gossip, but you notice the fatigue that grows as the day wears on. Bread is the soul of the festival and the main source of worry. If a batch fails, if the yeast is sour or the oven burns hot, disaster ripples outward. A ruined loaf is more than a lost sale. It's a hungry family, a neighbour's disappointment, a festival memory soured by want. The festival requires marvels, and so there are marvel makers, painters with their slates and chalks, fabric workers dyeing banners in cauldrons of madder and woad, seamstresses hunched by firelight, stitching costumes late into the night. Each tries to outdo the others, a brighter sash, a finer cloak, a mask so lifelike it seems to breathe. The festival is a competition as much for artisans as for dancers or knights. When a seam tears or a shoe splits mid-dance, it's the mender who's blamed, even if the cloth was cheap or the shoe old before the festival even began. Historians still debate the social standing of these craftspeople. Some argue that festivals were their moment to shine, an opportunity to build reputation, attract patrons, command higher prices. Others say the workload was crushing, the rewards fleeting, and the risks high. An accident or failure could mean a year's labour lost, or worse, public humiliation. The potter whose jugs all crack, the blacksmith whose nails bend, the baker whose bread goes flat. They bear the scorn of an entire community, their errors remembered far longer than their successes. Some jobs are more dangerous than others. The glassblowers, faces red from heat, hands raw from sharp shards, must rush to fill festival orders. Stained windows for the church, beads for the market, tiny vials for apothecaries. Each piece is a gamble, one slip, and hours of effort shatter in a blink. You watch a young apprentice, eyes watering from the smoke, cradle a perfect blue cup. His master nods, proud for a moment before barking, "Back to work, boy, no one buys just one." The carpenters are called on for everything. Building stages and scaffolds, repairing stalls, patching bridges. Their work is perilous, sometimes done half-drunk, always in a hurry. Nails bend, boards split, ladders collapse. When a stage gives way in the middle of a play, it's the carpenter who's cursed, not the actors. You hear stories of carpenters sleeping in haylofts or under their carts, too tired to return home, hands stained with pitch, dreams haunted by the day's close calls. The cooks and kitchen helpers, meanwhile, toil behind every tent and booth. Their world is hot, crowded, and always moving. Knives flash, water boils, fires roar. The risk of burns, cuts, or food poisoning is constant. A cook who scalds her hand is forced to wrap it and keep working. There's no one to take her place. When the last customers drift away, she sits with her feet in a tub of cool water, eyes closed, listening to the muffled music she's too tired to join. Every festival brings its share of injuries. The healer's tent is never empty. Carpenters with splinters or crushed fingers, bakers with burned arms, glassworkers with singed eyebrows, seamstresses with bleeding needle pricks. Sometimes a craftsman takes a risk too far, a collapsed tent, a splintered cartwheel, a kiln fire out of control. There are stories of old accidents, of a roof that caved in, a platform that fell, a potter who lost everything to a single moment of carelessness. Yet despite the pain and the pressure, there's pride. The craftspeople swap stories over mugs of cider in the shadows, whose table fetched the best price, who sold out of their best wares, who caught the eye of a noble patron. The gossip is sharp, but so is the laughter. There's camaraderie born of exhaustion and necessity. The old teach the young, the skilled help the struggling, and even rivals share a drink when the night grows late and the aches settle in. Among the festival's visitors, some never notice these hidden workers. The lords admire a painted shield, never knowing how many times it was sanded and reworked. The children marvel at a puppet show, never guessing how many stitches hold each marionette together. Even the dancers take for granted the shoes that protect their feet, the garlands that crown their heads. For most, the craftspeople are ghosts, present only in their creations, forgotten as soon as the music swells. But for those who look closer, the festival is a tapestry, each thread wound by an unseen hand. You see a baker wiping sweat from her brow as she hands a loaf to a grateful family, a blacksmith cradling his child as he rests beside the fire, a seamstress, alone and exhausted, still fixing a hem by moonlight. Their work is invisible but essential, their hardships hidden but real. Historians still debate whether these secret labours were worth it. Some claim the festival lifted the whole community, spreading wealth and pride. Others point out that for every craftsman who found success, many more slipped back into obscurity once the banners came down. The rush, the anxiety, the hidden wounds, they fade, but the memory of being needed, of creating something lasting, endures. As the night wears on, the craftspeople start to pack up. Tables are broken down, wares carefully wrapped, leftover bread and meat shared among those who can't afford waste. The forge cools, the sewing kits are tucked away, the last kiln fire doused. Tomorrow, the city will look ordinary again, but tonight, you walk through the afterglow, a world quietly shaped and coloured by hands that few will remember. You realise that every joy of the festival is balanced by this silent world of labour. The bread you eat, the music you dance to, the mask you borrow, all are gifts built on bruised hands and sleepless nights. The festival is as much about endurance as it is about celebration. It's a reminder that the greatest wonders are always built, quietly, out of hardship. You might think the festival's whimsy is best captured by the music, the feasting, the dances and the games, but as you wander away from the main square drawn by peals of laughter and the clatter of tiny wooden feet, you stumble into a scene both enchanting and strangely sombre, the puppet shows and pageants. Here, beneath the painted canvas of a makeshift stage, stories come alive in the flickering lantern light. Dragons are slain, foolish kings get their comeuppance, clever maidens save the day. Children squeal, old men chuckle, and for a brief spell all seems possible. But look past the lively marionettes and cheerful banners, and you'll find a reality as tangled as the strings on the puppets, a hidden world of exhaustion, cunning and sacrifice. The puppet masters are a breed apart at the festival. Arriving before dawn, they're the first to set up, and often the last to pack away, their lives measured not in gold but in calluses and clever improvisations. You watch a pair of them, one gaunt, one round as a turnip, hoist their stage together with practised ease, bickering all the while about a missing hinge or a splintered plank. Their hands move quickly, unspooling ropes, adjusting lanterns, checking every prop. The marionettes, painted and patched, wait patiently in a battered chest, a king with a wobbling crown, a wolf with a tooth missing, a maiden whose hair is just an old mop dyed yellow. When the show begins, the crowd gathers in a restless arc. The story is always familiar, but never quite the same. The puppet king proclaims a feast, the jester upends the table, the dragon belches fire, a wisp of smoky wool this year, and the crowd cheers as the hero emerges victorious as ever. For a while, you're caught up in it, swept along by the shouts and giggles, the smart-talking marionettes who always seem to know just what to say to draw a laugh from the grimmest face. The show is part magic, part memory, the kind of story that lingers long after the crowd disperses. But behind the scenes, the magic is hard-earned. Between acts, you see the puppet masters rubbing sore wrists, popping aching shoulders, squabbling in whispers over lost lines and broken strings. One pulls off his cap to reveal a forehead lined with fatigue. 8 shows today, he sighs, and not a single coin from that last crowd. His partner counts out a handful of coppers, eyes narrowing. "We'll eat tonight if I pawn my boots," she mutters. The laughter on stage, you realise, hides hunger and worry behind every punchline. The pageantry is no less demanding. Grand processions, saints and sinners, mythical beasts, banners bright with paint and hope, wind through the fair at sunset. The pageant actors draped in mismatched costumes march with aching feet, faces stiff from painted smiles. You see the town cobbler, barely recognisable as St. George, wielding a wooden sword as heavy as any blacksmith's hammer. The dragon is just 3 boys under a patchwork cloak, nearly suffocating from the effort of keeping the costume's tail off the muddy ground. Yet as the crowd erupts in cheers, each player straightens, caught in the old magic of applause. Historians still debate the purpose and meaning of these festival pageants. Some claim they were sacred, allegories to instruct the faithful and remind all of the wages of sin. Others see them as a carnival of subversion, a rare chance for ordinary people to poke fun at lords, clergy and tradition under the guise of drama. Every man a king, if only for a day, an old chronicler wrote. But the actors themselves know the real story. It's gruelling work, thankless at times, but for a fleeting moment, the lowest in town can command the attention of everyone, mayor, merchant and mud-stained beggar alike. After the applause fades, the pageant players trudge off, their reward often little more than a chunk of cheese, a half loaf and a mug of weak ale. Their costumes are damp with sweat, their voices hoarse from shouting over jeers and laughter. You pass a young woman dabbing her blistered feet, grinning despite the pain. "I was a queen today. Tomorrow I'll be back at the mill." For the puppet troupes, each day of the festival is a scramble, setting up in the cold, rain or dust, packing away in darkness, wary of thieves. If the show goes well, a hat fills with coins, and a crowd lingers to praise the wit and wisdom of the hero. But sometimes the audience is restless, the coins slow to drop, and the puppet masters must improvise new jokes, tease a fight out of the wooden knight, or bring on the dragon early just to keep the crowd's attention. The pressure is constant, and every lost audience is a night with a thinner supper. Children are especially ruthless. They cheer the hero, but if the dragon doesn't roar loud enough or the jester fumbles his song, they heckle without mercy. "Bring back the princess," they shout. "Make the wolf dance." The puppeteers know the dangers of losing the crowd. Once the children slip away, the grown-ups follow. When that happens, the troupe must find a new square, a new audience, and start again. Between shows, the actors and puppet masters nurse their bodies with the little they can afford. Stale bread, watery broth, sometimes nothing but laughter and the promise of next time. The props wear out. Strings snap, faces flake, paint fades under the hot sun. Mending is a never-ending task, done by lantern light with numb fingers and tired eyes. There's an unspoken code. If another troupe's show collapses, you lend a rope or a story or a spare puppet, rivalry set aside in the name of survival. The puppet shows and pageants are not without their own dramas. There are jealousies. Over the best performance spots, the most memorable roles, the cleverest scripts. Sometimes a pageant is sabotaged, a prop hidden, a cue missed, a rival troupe spreading rumours that their puppets are cursed or their dragon has fleas. Most of the time, it's harmless mischief. But occasionally an argument spills into the open and you witness 2 troupes nearly come to blows behind the chapel, both defending the honour of their wooden heroes. The boundaries between reality and fantasy blur for the performers as well as the audience. A boy who plays the jester starts making jokes in real life, even when it gets him in trouble. A shy apprentice, cast as the dragon's head, finds courage she never knew she had. A girl who was always overlooked at market is crowned Queen of the Fair for a night, her laughter echoing in the dark. These moments are precious, proof that even in hardship there's room for transformation. Historians still debate whether these puppet plays and pageants shaped the minds of festival goers. Did they teach lessons, spark rebellion, or simply offer escape? Some say they were a mirror, reflecting the hopes and fears of an entire community. Others insist the audience just wanted a good laugh or a thrilling scare. The truth is probably both. You see it in the faces around you, old men tearing up at a love story, children shrieking at the dragon, young lovers sneaking glances during the wedding scene. As darkness deepens, you watch a final puppet show play out to a dwindling crowd. The marionettes sag a little, The voices crack, but when the wooden hero defeats the villain, a weary cheer goes up. The puppet master bows, his partner collects the last coins, and the two disappear into the shadows, already discussing tomorrow's script. The night belongs now to the clean-up. Banners are rolled up, costumes folded, marionettes tucked carefully into their chests. You see a troupe sharing out their earnings, some coin, a loaf of bread, a heel of cheese, before curling together in a blanket, laughter fading into weary dreams. Even the grandest festival pageant ends in silence and aching bones. As you drift away, the echoes of stories linger. Brave knights, clever jesters, queens for a night. You realise that the festival's real magic is not just in the stories told, but in the resilience of those who tell them, night after night against the odds. Behind every puppet, every mask, every painted backdrop is a life shaped by hardship and hope, a dream as fragile as the strings that bring the heroes to life. If you thought the hardships of the festival lay hidden only in sweat and bruises, you find a new kind of discomfort in the crowd's most ordinary spaces, right where everyone gathers, eats and dances. At first, the press of bodies, the laughter and food, the carnival haze seem inviting. But as you squeeze through the lanes, you notice something odd. A fetid whiff beneath the perfume of roast meat and flower garlands, an itch in your throat, a sticky residue on your shoes. Welcome to the world of festival hygiene, a world where horrors lurk not in dungeons or dark tales, but right under everyone's nose, hidden in plain sight. From the moment the first tent is pitched, festival sanitation becomes a battle no one can truly win. The medieval city, rarely clean at the best of times, is pushed to its limits by the throngs of visitors, wandering livestock, discarded food, spilled drink and human carelessness. Even before the crowds swell, you find buckets of waste poured into alleys, chamber pots dumped from upper windows, dogs and chickens rooting through heaps of offal. The streets, already muddy from spring rains or dry and dusty from summer sun, turn into an ever-changing obstacle course of slop and trash. The festival organisers try to fight the tide. Teams of sweepers, armed with straw brooms and grim faces, make half-hearted passes at the worst of the refuse. Barrels are set out for food scraps and slop, but they overflow within hours. Pigs, dogs, and even daring children rooting through them for half-eaten treats. A fishmonger near the main square throws his scales and bones into the gutter, while a butcher's apprentice, too tired to care, dumps a bucket of bloody water behind his stall. By dusk, the area is a mire of sticky mud, grease, feathers, and God knows what else. Historians still argue about how much attention medieval festival planners paid to hygiene. Some chroniclers praise their efforts, pointing out that in the grandest fairs, rules were posted against littering, that fines were levied for throwing refuse into the main lanes, and that town criers warned against dumping waste in the drinking well. But others insist it was mostly wishful thinking. The filth of the fair is its truest souvenir, writes one sardonic monk, and you suspect he's not wrong. Worse still are the makeshift privies. Rows of communal latrines, little more than boards over pits, are set up at the edges of the festival. A handful of more respectable houses offer relief for a small coin, but these fill quickly, and the lines are long. Most festival goers make do with whatever dark alley or bit of scrub they can find, the result being a creeping odour that rises with the sun and never quite fades. Young children are sent to empty chamber pots, their protests ignored, and you see more than one splash the contents onto their own feet, or, in the chaos, onto an unlucky passerby. It's not just the smells. The spread of disease is an ever-present threat. Every spilled cup, every shared loaf, every grubby hand on a shared dance partner is a risk. You notice a cluster of children coughing into their sleeves, a group of young men wiping sweat from their faces with muddy rags, a dog licking a pie before it's snatched up by a hungry boy. The healers circulate through the crowd with pouches of dried herbs, muttering warnings about fevers and bad airs. But their remedies, a sprig of rosemary, a mouthful of vinegar, a whispered prayer, offer little protection against the crush and squalor of festival life. Food preparation is its own minefield. You pass a cook stirring a bubbling cauldron, occasionally wiping her hands on her apron, which you notice is already streaked with blood and egg. Bread is torn and shared by unwashed hands. Meat is carved and passed from one grimy palm to another. The pies are delicious, but more than one hides a questionable filling. The cheese sweats on the table, the fish stinks by midday, and the water, drawn from wells crowded with hands and buckets, tastes faintly of iron and old cabbage. It's not surprising that some festival goers nurse upset stomachs or worse, but most just shrug it off. It's the price of a good time, an old man tells you, dunking his bread in ale as if daring fate to strike him down. Bathing is almost non-existent. If you're lucky, you might find a barrel of rainwater behind a cook's tent, or a friendly farmer who lets you dunk your head in his trough. But most festival goers simply endure the grime. By evening, sweat and smoke have glued clothes to skin. Hair is matted with dust, and even the fine lords and ladies reek beneath their perfumes and pomanders. A noble woman, her gown gleaming in the torchlight, passes by, and you catch a whiff of something sour beneath her rosewater. You realise with a start that everyone, high or low, is equally at the mercy of the festival's filth. Historians still debate whether this filth was simply accepted or secretly despised. Some argue that people didn't notice the stink. They were used to it, and the joy of the festival outweighed any discomfort. Others say the filth was a favourite subject of satire, the butt of countless jokes and comic songs. If the mud's not past your ankles by midnight, goes one rhyme, it's not a real festival. Yet, you hear more than one complaint whispered in the dark. Next year we'll go to the village up the hill. They keep their privies cleaner. Even the entertainers aren't immune. The dancers sweat through their costumes, slipping on beer-soaked planks. The jugglers retrieve their pins from puddles only to wipe them on their breeches and toss them again. The actors swap masks slick with grease and sweat, and the musicians, crammed together on a makeshift stage, complain about fleas and lice. It's common for the acrobats to finish a show only to scratch at their arms and legs, cursing the vermin that seem to thrive in the festival's chaos. The animals add another layer of complication. Horses and oxen foul the streets, goats and pigs root through piles of garbage, and dogs leave their own marks everywhere. You watch a group of children try to corral a pig that's escaped its pen, the chase ending with all of them rolling in a puddle of something that's definitely not water. The animal handlers try to keep order, but with so many creatures, it's a losing battle. As night falls, the darkness hides some of the worst sights, but the smells linger. Torches and lanterns flicker over heaps of discarded food, bones gnawed bare, and the odd bit of cloth or shoe abandoned in the mud. The sweepers make a last weary circuit, shoving the biggest messes out of the way, but everyone knows the festival will leave its mark on the town for days, sometimes weeks, after the last banner is folded. Despite all this, the people endure. Some even take a perverse pride in the squalor. You hear songs celebrating the stench of freedom, jokes about who will fall sick first, dares to see who can last the longest without washing. There's a sense that surviving the festival's filth is part of what makes the memory sweet. You can't have a good time without a little mud on your boots, laughs a miller, showing off a blister the size of a plum. Of course, not everyone escapes unscathed. As the festival ends, the healer's tent is crowded. Fevers, rashes, and upset bellies abound. Some say it's the air, others blame the beer, a few point to the foreign traders who brought new maladies with them. Historians still debate whether the filth of medieval festivals is exaggerated in memory or played down in nostalgia. Some chronicles dwell on the stench and the sickness, while others remember only the joy. But you, walking home through the fading light, your shoes caked in mud, your throat dry and sore, know that both are true. The festival's filth is as much a part of its story as the banners and the music, the laughter and the pain. As the last torch is extinguished and the festival square is left in darkness, a strange hush settles over the town. Tomorrow the sweepers and rain will reclaim the streets. The scent of flowers and fire will fade, replaced by the earthy reality of everyday life. But for now, you remember every step, the slipperiness of the mud, the grit under your fingernails, the sweet, pungent mix of joy and discomfort that is the secret, unspoken cost of celebration. The sky is paling, the banners sagging with dew, and still not everyone has left the festival grounds. There's a subtle transformation at dawn, a fading of magic, an unmasking of reality. Now you see the festival's true legacy taking shape in the faces and bodies of those left behind. If the day was for joy, spectacle, and a little chaos, the aftermath is for reckoning. The festival's brutality lingers not only in memories, but in the bruises, debts, quarrels and hungers that settle in the bones of a medieval town as the celebration finally sputters to its end. The work of the clean-up begins in silence, broken only by the cawing of crows who swoop in to pick at the remains. Sweepers and townsfolk, armed with shovels and brooms, begin the slow process of returning the square to its everyday self. Piles of bones, spent torches and withered garlands are swept aside. Stalls are dismantled, battered carts loaded with scraps and broken pottery. Everything that could not be sold or stolen is simply left. Withered turnips, gnawed loaves, shoes without mates, ribbons lost by children in the wild tumble of the night. Some, too poor or too proud to let anything go to waste, sift through the heaps for salvage. An old woman in a tattered cloak pulls a heel of bread from a garbage pile and wipes it clean, tucking it away for later. Two boys fight over a dented helmet, only to abandon it for a shiny bit of string. The sweepers curse and joke, shaking their heads at the riches left behind by those who could afford to waste. The market is gone, but its ghosts remain. A half-eaten pie here, a puddle of wax from a fallen candle there, the sticky outline of spilled honey on the stones. The festival's labourers look the most worn. You spot the blacksmith dozing upright beside his cold forge, his hands blistered, his eyes red. The bakers and cooks, whose work never stopped for 3 days, pack up their breadboards with slow, aching movements, their voices reduced to hoarse whispers. The seamstresses rub their eyes, squinting at torn banners and dirty costumes, already calculating how much work remains before life resumes its usual pace. Every craftsman, every servant, every child who fetched and carried now bears the festival's mark. A limp, a cough, a burn, a grin mixed with regret. Debt is everywhere, though most try not to speak of it just yet. The festival is a time for spending, for gambling, for risk, so much so that many families will feel the pinch for months. You overhear a weaver arguing with a tavern keeper over an unpaid tab, a blacksmith promising next week's wages for today's repairs, a young woman trying to pawn a brooch for a little flower. Merchants quietly count their losses. Not every stall did well. Some will leave town poorer than they arrived, muttering about bad luck or greedy townsfolk. You hear stories of borrowed money, of pawnbrokers and sharp-eyed lenders lurking on the festival's margins, ready to collect their dues as soon as the last song fades. There are bruises too, literal and otherwise. A boy hobbles past on crutches, shin-bandaged from the games. A dancer's feet are bound in strips of linen, every step a wince. The tournament's losers move slowly, pride and flesh equally battered. One juggler cradles a broken finger, a merchant nurse his black eye, the result of a late-night argument gone too far. Some quarrels will linger all year, old resentments flaring anew with every festival. Even joy can leave scars. You hear a woman chide her husband for drinking too much and ruining their savings. A mother frets over a child who caught a fever in the mud. The memory of laughter and spectacle mixes with bitterness. "It was a good time, but it cost us dear," sighs one old man, counting the coins in his palm. Historians still argue over whether festivals left towns better or worse. Some say the influx of trade and visitors brought prosperity, new ideas, and the promise of change. Others point to the debts, the illnesses, the fights, the petty thefts, and the sense of exhaustion that hangs over everything in the aftermath. "The price of joy is always paid in the morning," says a local proverb. and as you watch a young girl sweep up rose petals with a broken broom, you feel the weight of its truth. The healers are busiest now. The night's wounds are revealed in the morning light. Sprains, cuts, headaches, fevers. Some injuries will fade in days, others will linger for months, and a few may never heal. The healer moves from one patient to another with brisk efficiency, a poultice here, a whispered charm there. She scolds the reckless, soothes the weeping, and keeps a careful count of who owes what for her services. There's an emotional hangover too, more subtle but just as real. Not everyone feels lighter after the festival. Some mourn missed chances, a lost dance, a spurned favour, a gamble gone wrong. Lovers who quarrelled in the shadows avoid each other in the cold light of morning. Friendships strained by competition or jealousy go silent. The excitement that swelled for days now feels like a tide going out, leaving behind regret and longing, questions without answers. You see how the festival's drama lingers in the stories that begin to circulate even as the square is cleared. Children reenact the games, shouting and tumbling, inventing their own victories. Old men compare bruises, boasting about glories that grow with each telling. Musicians, faces drawn with fatigue, play one last tune for coins from those packing up. The puppet masters, their voices hoarse, swap tales of the best crowd and the worst luck. The festival lives on in gossip and memory, 1,000 retellings twisting every moment into legend or cautionary tale. As you walk through the slowly emptying square, you see the marks the festival leaves on the town itself. The grass is worn to dirt, the fountain stained, the church steps chipped by a fallen barrel. Banners hang limp, stained with rain and wine, scraps of silk fluttering like faded memories. There's a kind of beauty in the decay, a reminder that all things, even joy, must be paid for, and all feasts leave their bones behind. The townspeople, despite their complaints and aches, are already talking of next time. Plans are made, grievances aired, debts promised to be paid. The children, for all their exhaustion, are eager for another taste of freedom, another night of games and sweets. The festival, brutal though it may be behind the scenes, becomes the very rhythm of life, the thing that gives each season its meaning, each hardship a brief moment of relief. As the sun finally rises and the last carts roll away, the festival is over. But the reckoning continues, in the ache of the baker's back, the empty purse of the merchant, the song half remembered by a child trudging home, sticky with mud and joy. The brutality of the medieval festival isn't just in its violence or its filth, but in its aftermath, the way it leaves everyone changed, if only a little, and the town itself marked until the banners rise again. You linger at the edge of the emptying square, the hush of the morning broken only by a few stragglers sweeping debris, a lone musician plucking a plaintive tune, and the distant corps of crows who claim the festival's leavings as their prize. The town feels different, scraped raw, somehow smaller, its magic faded with the coloured banners and laughter. Yet, as you watch, a gentler sort of reflection settles over those who remain. The festival, with all its brutality and brilliance, has left its final, quiet mark, a reckoning in memory and spirit that is as enduring as it is invisible. This is the other side of celebration. The slow, necessary work of healing, forgiveness, and the stitching back together of the frayed community that the revelry so thoroughly unravelled. In the soft, slanting morning light, neighbours begin to talk again. Not the loud boasts and taunts of festival night, but quieter exchanges. A woman helps a limping boy across the muddy square, shaking her head at his torn sleeve, but hiding a smile as he describes his moment of glory in the sack race. Two men, who fought over a spilled pint just hours ago, exchange awkward nods and begin to right a toppled bench together. At the market's edge, a merchant whose stall was robbed sits with a baker who slipped him a free loaf. Old resentments, for a while, are nudged aside by the business of returning to normal. The festival stories, those freshly spun threads of memory, are already changing shape. You hear them everywhere as the town stirs. A juggler's miraculous save becomes more daring with each telling. The tale of the runaway pig gains new details. A heroic girl, a clever dog, a near miss at the pie stand. The events that felt so painful or humiliating in the moment, bruises, falls, a spilled stew, are softened by laughter, retold with a sly wink. The worst quarrels and accidents are for some tucked away to fade with time. For others they become lessons, warnings passed on to the next generation with a mix of sternness and affection. In the aftermath, the festival's quietest victims and heroes emerge. You see the kitchen helpers who fed hundreds slip away unnoticed, their arms full of borrowed pots and pans, faces exhausted but faintly proud. The blacksmith who worked through the night to shoe 100 horses and mend broken swords sits with his child in the cool shade, hands stained but finally still. The seamstress who patched costumes for a dozen dancers naps against a crumbling wall, the rattle of brooms and clatter of carts becoming a lullaby. Some wounds are slow to heal. The constable visits those who suffered theft or injury, offering what justice he can, but most simply shake their heads and accept what's lost. A healer moves through the streets, checking on the feverish and bruised. Her remedies are as much comfort as cure. A cool cloth, a patient ear, a whispered blessing. For every sharp memory of festival pain, there's a gesture of care to balance it. A neighbour lending a coin, a baker sending leftover rolls to the poorest homes, a child forgiven for sneaking an extra sweet. You notice as the day grows brighter, the town slowly finds its order again. The healer's tent is folded away, replaced by a stall selling onions and salted fish. The tournament ground, once churned into mud, is raked and planted with fresh seed. Children, still muddy and sticky, are scolded back into chores. Teenagers eye each other shyly, the festival's masks and bravado already slipping away. The music fades, but its echoes ripple through the stories retold over breakfast and in the quiet work of rebuilding. Forgiveness, in the wake of such intensity, is not a simple thing. Some quarrels, between rivals, between husband and wife, between children who lost at games, are mended with a handshake or a hug. Others persist, the pain deeper, the wounds slower to close. You overhear a woman whispering her resentment about a neighbour's sharp words, but she helps mend a broken fence just the same. The festival's mess, its literal mud, and its metaphorical hurt is not cleared in a single day. The festival also leaves its hopeful traces. For every sorrow, there is new possibility. Babies conceived during festival night are whispered about all year. Young couples who first dance beneath the banners begin planning for betrothals. New friendships forged in the chaos become lifelines in harder months. Old rivalries sometimes dissolve when both sides are too tired to care. A new game, invented by children in the square, will become a tradition for the next festival. A thread of joy spun from last night's noise. You see how the festival's hardships sharpen the meaning of ordinary days. After a week of overindulgence, a bowl of plain porridge tastes like a feast. After the risk of public embarrassment, a quiet day at work feels like peace. The aches and debts, the bruises and regrets are folded into the town's story, reminders of how fragile both joy and suffering can be. Some families will pack up and leave, seeking fortunes elsewhere, their disappointment at the festival's end too keen to bear. Others will talk for months of their triumphs. A daughter crowned queen of the garland, a son who won the foot race, a baker whose tarts were sold out before noon. For the poorest, the aftermath is sharpest. Debts owed, shoes ruined, stomachs empty. The church distributes what charity it can, but the festival's aftermath is always unequal, and some wounds, hunger, loneliness, disappointment, are too common to be remarked upon. Yet for all this, as the festival's chaos recedes, the town becomes itself again. The routines of work and worship resume. The banners packed away become next year's hope. The hardest lessons, about pain, pride, compassion, are quietly absorbed, only to resurface in next year's revels, changed by the passing of time. Children beg their parents to tell stories about the games and the puppets, the tournaments and the wild dances, Old men lean together at the well, retelling and reshaping the events to suit their memories, softening or sharpening as they please. You leave the square as it empties, the sun now high, the town quieter but strangely lighter. For all the festival's darkness, its hardship and brutality, something softer remains. Perhaps it's the memory of laughter, or the resilience found in helping hands, or simply the sense that for a night, everyone was part of something bigger. A shared story, a wild dance, a test of endurance, a moment of belonging that lingers long after the mud is washed away. As you pass beneath the empty banners, you realize this is the true ending, not the return to perfection, but the beginning of another story. The bruises will fade, the debts will be paid or forgotten, and next year, when the trumpets sound and the first lanterns are lit, everyone will come again. Not because they forget the pain, but because in some strange way it becomes the very proof that the festival was real. The sun drifts higher, casting the last gentle light over the newly quiet streets, and you feel the hush settle deeper, soothing what the revels frayed. The festival is over now, its echoes fading into gentle memory. Where last night's shouts and songs clattered, there's only the coo of doves, the distant clang of a bell, the slow creak of a cart carrying the festival's ghosts away. The town, battered and healed, breathes out, shoulders relaxing, hearts a little lighter. The smell of spilled wine and trampled grass gives way to the clean scent of dawn, and the pain of bruised feet is softened by the comfort of a familiar bed. All that remains is the soft pulse of stories whispered as children drift asleep, the secret pride of having survived another year's wild magic, and the gentle reminder that even the harshest nights end in morning. Let yourself drift now, the noise receding, every ache quieted, every memory fading to a blur of lantern light and distant laughter. In this quiet, you are safe. The worst is past. Tomorrow will be easier, steadier, the world a little softer than before. Breathe deep and let go. Let the festival's wildness dissolve. Let the hard moments fall away and slip gently into dreams where the music never ends and every story finds a place to rest. You made it, you're home, and everything is calm once more. Sweet dreams.